are running all over retrieving balls, and it creates friction if people from the different sports are waiting to play at the same time. There are many tennis courts in the township that sit empty for the majority of the time. Tennis players seldom play when it's wet because it's difficult to play with a wet tennis ball. You very seldom see tennis being played on these courts in the winter. Seasonal weather or wet courts do not have the same effect on pickleballers. They play outside 12 months a year. Although we don't want to create friction with the tennis community, there's a very economical solution to fixing the problem for pickleball players. At West Langley, they resurfaced a tennis court into 4 pickleball courts. This has allowed a maximum of 16 players to play pickleball at once instead of a maximum of 4 for tennis. There are also a few places that have 4 or 6 courts. If you're willing to resurface a few of the courts, either ones not frequently used or where there are multiple courts, it would help fill the need and demand for more pickleball courts in the township, and there would still be plenty of tennis courts. We do realize with pickleball, there should be a buffer zone between the pickleball courts and the residences. The sound of the ball in pickleball is louder than the sound of a tennis ball, so it's important that the pickleball courts are built a reasonable distance from residences. There's still many areas that would be suitable. 3 places come to mind: Walnut Grove Park, Langley Secondary, and the Event Center. All these places have ample space, parking, and enough distance from residences. The courts here are also right beside high schools or middle schools and close enough to elementary schools to be accessible and beneficial to many students. At Walnut Grove Park, there are 6 tennis courts. By converting 2 tennis courts, you could easily have 6 to 8 pickleball courts, and there would still be 4 tennis courts. If the back courts were converted, there would definitely be enough of a buffer zone between the courts and townhomes. Langley Secondary has 2 courts, and it borders MAP, which is a major sports center. There's lots of activity here, and pickleball would certainly add to the appeal here. The Event Center would be a very logical place for pickleball, as this is a major activity center for sports in the township. There are 4 tennis courts, and would be an excellent area to convert some of the tennis courts to pickleball. The township spending millions upon millions of dollars on rinks, field houses, and playing events at the Event Center. I'm totally in favor of this. I think it's great. I've always said I think the Event Center is the best thing that's ever happened to Langley. It's a central hub of sport activity for the Lower Mainland and a facility most places can only dream of having. The cost of resurfacing a few tennis courts and converting them to pickleball would hardly be a cost item compared to all the development here and would add even more appeal to the Event Center. I personally do not know the cost, but the township experienced this by converting the courts at West Langley, or the tennis court at West Langley, so I'm sure it would be not difficult to find this information. The benefits would be numerous in terms of health, wellness, and fitness for people of all ages and genders, and it would be space well used. I believe this would be an incredible investment for the community. If you build the courts, pickleballers will come. On behalf of the pickleballers of Langley, please consider our request.
Great. A few questions from council.
Questions?
Yep. Great. So I have a few questions from council. Councilor
Yes.
Richter, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for your delegation and for explaining it. I actually saw an article on the news last night where they're talking about pickleball in Toronto and how they're taking indoor malls that are no longer being used and converting those to pickleball courts, which I thought was a great idea. So I've got some questions for you. Now, do all age groups use it, or is it primarily focused on the older age groups?
All age groups.
All age groups.
age groups,
Okay.
Mainly, well, during the day, kids are at school and, quite often it's retired people in the morning. Different shift comes in later in the day,
Yeah.
people that have worked, but they're always busy and filled up.
Okay. And you mentioned that Surrey had a certain number in Langley City. How many more pickleball courts do you think we need in Langley Township?
The sport is growing leaps and bounds, and we have to start somewhere. So any amount now would be great, but if you build them, they will be filled up, wherever you build them. I can assure you of that. But as I said, you can convert one pickleball court into, if it's the right dimension, or one tennis court, if it's the right dimensions, because there's quite a lot of space between the baseline and the fence. It's possible to get 4 pickleball courts into one tennis court. So if you convert 4 tennis courts, it's possible to get 16
pickleball
But
court.
you need fencing if they're back to back.
If they're back to back. Now, have you had any discussions at all with the tennis groups about
No,
maybe sharing
we
using
have
them?
not. Because where we
Okay.
play, we don't see tennis players.
Okay, all right. And you mentioned Walnut Grove Park, LSS, and LEC.
Yeah.
So those would be the preferred locations
Well,
where you'd
not
like to see
necessarily
them?
preferred. They have ample space. They have parking. They're near schools. So where we play now, West Langley Park, it's a little bowl. There's actually homes there, but nobody, there's no complaints that I've heard about. And it's packed all the time. And
Okay.
those places probably a little more central and, you know, available for, accessible for the schools as well.
Okay, and my last question is, I heard again on that news
Yep.
clip last night that they've developed a ball that's quieter than the current pickleball ball?
They are working on it. I've read a couple things too.
Yeah.
And somebody also is working on a paddle as well. That's
That's
a little
quieter.
quieter. But yeah, it's, you know, you hear the pop of the ball and, you know, it's.
But you haven't actually tried one of the quieter
No, I haven't.
ones?
No,
Okay.
no, they
great.
aren't. I don't think they've got into developing them. He's just working on the development of them. Yes.
Well, thank you very much for coming and talking to us today.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Councillor Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. Mercer. A little strange calling you that one, isn't it? Only known him since '72. One thing that really appeals to me, and if you could expand on, is the cost to play. How much are those rackets?
Well, you can get expensive rackets and you can get cheap rackets. I mean, you can get wooden rackets, which are preferable, for probably $20. But you can get rackets from $30, $40 up to $400. You know,
Yeah.
the better players, it's like tennis and a racquetball. You know, they've developed the rackets and they make the rackets out of different materials and yeah, and the balls, as far as the ball, they're about $3 each.
Yeah, Bill, the reason I asked that is because, you know, right from the very start, I've been looking for sports where kids that are dealing with economic hardship can join in. But then this is, you know, after thinking about that, I went, there's an awful lot of adults that are suffering with economic hardship right now, too. So this is really appealing to me. And, you know, it's not a secret. I've been talking to these guys for a while. And after the second delegation, I've got a motion that I've distributed. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of tennis players have switched to pickleball because it's easier, basically easier on the body. You aren't running around. And when you go down to the States, to places now, like even RV parks, they've got pickleball courts in the RV places, and it's catching on like crazy everywhere.
Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mr. Mercer, for coming. I do appreciate that. You know, I pride myself as being one of the worst tennis, squash, racquetball, and badminton players in the province. I'm the second worst golfer in the province. I did want to ask you regarding pickleball expanding and finding the right location. I wanted to pick up what was said a few minutes ago, and I was just thinking about myself, as they design different things for sports, I know that I don't play hockey, but my son did. They used to use different pucks at different times. Like when they even use for training, they use a puck that was softer, easier on equipment, also preventing injury. I mean, I know it's mentioned. I know they're not down to using webs, that's as simple as what tennis rackets or squash or lacrosse and things like that. But the thing is, if you could get something, or in the future, there would be a ball or a racket that could cut the noise or something, that would mean something. I don't expect anybody in the audience to design it tomorrow, but, you know, as we plan things for the future. And depending on age groups, depending on other things, that all would matter as well. I know probably the reason why you don't, and this has happened years and years and years ago, before centuries ago, why the tennis ball is the way it is, because it's, you know, you don't hear it a lot, right? Because it's the design of the ball. So that would be something, and that would make a difference, certainly, as placement for those, because that means you can place them anywhere type of thing. Have you had a chance, it's good that the school, the Langley City is doing that, because it's, we're always looking for Langley City to participate in things. But I appreciated your comments on the event center, because last Saturday, Langley Minor Hockey celebrated 50 years. And that facility was built by the council, as you say, it's a good facility, a number of years ago, and we have all sorts of different age groups and different people, from basketball to volleyball to obviously hockey. They have gymnastics there, so it gives you an idea. Maybe pickleball does make sense to go in there. Thank you very much for your delegation. Yep.
Councilor Martins?
Thank you. So nice to see you, and I love that you guys got here after our first conversation a number of weeks back, brought this information for us. Yeah, pickleball is just, it's growing in leaps and bounds. It's a huge sport, and I personally have a lot of friends who love it and actively participate, and I'm aware of the lack of space to do it. They're often taping out a court on the schoolyard on a weekend, and to make it work with some painter's tape or something on the ground. But the question I had for you is, what you mentioned, buffer zones with regards to the noise. Do you have any sort of data or what that looks like, or how far it should be?
I don't have any data on how far it should be. At West Langley Park, they're fairly close. It's built in a bit of a bowl there, so that may, help a bit. But there's been no port. The people are there every day, all winter, if it's not pouring. I mean, it was filled this morning, and it always is. And there's been no complaints there. And that's fairly close. And
Okay.
I mean, there's a bit of a buffer, but so no. I guess it would depend on the tolerance of the neighbors as well. But,
Yeah, but that's helpful.
Yeah,
We can use
yeah.
that as an example. And I also appreciate the economical ask of looking at existing locations that have tennis. I think it would be great if we could perhaps expand on it, and rather than doing that, or maybe do that to start, but looking at actual dedicated
yeah.
built with roofs, so that you can do it in all weather. So if I could dream a little, that's what I'd like to see on behalf of all pickleball players, because it certainly is a growing sport, and I know that those facilities would be very well used.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a starting point, right?
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much.
For you.
Councilor Kunst?
Yeah, thank you for coming, and great to hear about the support that pickleball has. I was introduced to pickleball last summer, and I stepped on the court, and then when I lost, I didn't want to stop playing. So my question for you is, do you have a league, and where can I sign up?
We do not have a league. Matt, who's going to be speaking next, he teaches classes for beginners and people who are just getting into the game, and that's at the community center where you sign up. There's no leagues because we don't have enough.
You drop in.
We don't have enough facilities to
Right.
develop a league.
Great.
There are lots of tournaments.
Yeah.
And I mean, to have a tournament with a reasonable amount of players, you need at least 8 courts. Douglas Park has a tournament every year. They raised over $21,000 for the local school last year, and there were close to 200 people in the tournament.
Yeah, I used to work right down in that area, and I used to see, that was my first introduction actually to watching. I had no idea what this game was about, and then I was watching. It was very interesting. Just as a note to your mobile home parks, I was recently last year in Los Barriles, which is in Mexico, and they are the top destination for pickleball players in the world, I believe. So anyway, that was an interesting thing to me. So yeah, I totally support finding ways for pickleball players to play, for sure. Thanks for coming.
Great. No other questions from council? We'll move on to the second pickleball delegation from Matt and Nan. Please come forward. You don't need to,
Does that move up?
it'll pick it up. You don't need to
Okay.
adjust the microphone. Go ahead.
First of all, thank you for this opportunity. My name's Matt Annan. I've lived in Fort Langley for 33 years. My wife and I raised our 3 kids in Fort Langley. I've been involved in sports all my life, and I think it's important to let you know that I really strongly believe in community. I've been a coach, Steve Nash basketball, Fraser Valley volleyball, North Langley baseball, North Langley softball, and I just finished a 10-year stint, Special Olympics BC basketball and golf. So I come from a big sports background. I know and I'm passionate about how important sports is for people of all ages. So that's kind of my background. I'm going to sort of talk about a lot of what Bill said, but just sort of to add some things. I've been involved in the sport a little bit longer. I want to talk more about why I'm passionate about the game, how I found the game, how important I think it is for bonding the community, and how important I think, most important of all, I guess, for some people, is the money factor and how it can be beneficial to the township, because this is a growing sport that has a lot of potential. In 2010, as I was nearing retirement and wanted a place where it didn't rain so much, I went down south and I found a retirement community. I bought a place in a place called St. George, Utah, a place called Entrada. At the time I went down there, I fully intended, because being an athlete all my life, the basketball and the volleyball and the tennis were getting much harder on my body, and I was going to go down there and play some tennis and some golf. I found the golf okay. I found nobody was playing tennis anymore. And I found this weird game on this sort of badminton-sized court with a tennis net with ping pong skills, and I thought, what, is this for kids? I thought this was a retirement complex. But I soon found out and was invited in to play this game of pickleball, and I was hooked immediately, mainly because I beat everybody because I was much younger than that population. But I found that there was a community downtown. They had a place downtown where they'd started pickleball with temporary nets. So that's how I was familiar to the game. When I came back, couldn't find it anywhere. But I did find it. I was going to Surrey, I was going to Abbotsford, I was going to Richmond, North Vancouver. I was going all these different places just to play this game. So why am I so passionate about this game? Most of us are in the same boat with why we love this game. First reason that I've got down, this game is just so damn much fun. It really is. I've played a lot of sports. I've never experienced anything on the fun level like pickleball. Number 2, competition. I played basketball, volleyball, and tennis at a fairly high level. I was wearing out, so I wasn't competitive anymore. Not everybody likes to play competitive. I do. I found pickleball, and these people know I'm pretty darn good at the game. And so that's what sort of keeps me going. I found something as I've got older and things are falling apart with my hips, my knees, and my shoulders, that I was still pretty good at this game. Number 3, the social aspect is huge. Pickleball people are a different breed. You go there, it's inclusive, you're invited, you can come up on your own and people invite you and they play. And I've been all over the world to play. Fun fact, I was part of the first group that ever played pickleball in Ecuador. I just got back this summer from Slovenia and Croatia, where I played pickleball. I don't go on a holiday unless it's got a pickleball court. Number 4 is the learning curve. This is why it's so popular for all this demographics, is that you can get good really quick. However, to get great is extremely difficult. And that's what keeps everybody coming back to play. Number 5, risk of injury. Risk of injury. Big guys, we don't wear too well. I've played pickleball now 14 years, never hurt myself. I can play 3 hours a day, every day, never hurt myself. So that's another key factor. The low cost, we've already mentioned the low cost. Bill talked about it. Pickleball paddle, a good pickleball paddle that you can get by of, Harvey knows this, $60 for a good pickleball paddle and a good pair of shoes, that's all you need. The mental and physical health benefit, probably the most important of all. We all know what mental health is doing. It's going through the roof with anxiety and depression. And the physical benefits, just the way that you feel. Pickleball is outstanding. We don't need more hospitals. We don't need more doctors' offices. We need more pickleball courts. So those are the reasons why we play the game. I got to go quick here. So these stats are taken from Pickleball Canada, just so you know. Fastest growing sport in Canada and the US, between 15 and 30% increase per year. 5.8 million people play. 1.4 million in Canada. What I didn't know when I went on this site is that this game is more popular in Canada than it is in the United States. Per capita, it's 2.6% Canadians play pickleball. In the States, it's 1.2%. I didn't even know that. You think it's an old people's sport. Well, it is, because they're sitting there. But it's also the fastest demographic, I think we sent you some charts, is the 18 to 34 year age group. And I'm thinking, once the young people pick onto this game, that's what's going to explode it even faster. That's why it's growing so fast, because it's for everybody. Currently, there's 200 pickleball clubs across Canada. There's not one in Langley because we don't have any courts. I was a member of the Surrey Pickleball Club. I taught there, 325 members, but seriously, the traffic is getting brutal. I want to play in the township. I don't want to drive all the way to South Surrey. I'm done with that. I'm currently the instructor of pickleball at the Walnut Grove Rec Center. Me and a couple other volunteers. Since April, I got my pickleball through Pickleball Canada, my certification, so I can teach it. Since April, we've put 20 classes through. Every single class full with a waiting list. My friend Bob, is Bob here? I don't know if Bob's here. Bob teaches at Langley City, Tim's, full waiting lists. So the demand is there. Harry, what was his name? Henry, 84 years old, was in my class with his 82-year-old wife. I've had parents with their kids, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now, I just want to go back to St. George a little bit. When I went there, there was 4 courts in my retirement community, expanded to 16. Today, there's 13 locations in St. George. St. George has a population of just under 100,000, about 2/3 the size of the township. 13 locations, 78 dedicated courts, and in July, they just announced, being built right now, is 45 more courts. They're going to have 120 courts in a city that's got less than 100,000 people. It's full. The other thing that's cool about this, they've got 130 leagues. Each league pays a fee to the city to use those courts. Plus, they run tournaments every other weekend. There's 2 pro circuits and 1 in Canada. If you draw the pros, the money it brings in for restaurants, small business, for the economy is $2 million per tournament. My question is, why can we not be the St. George of Canada? Because currently the Canadian Championships are in Red Deer because there's no facility here that can hold. What's required of a championship is 24 courts minimum, dedicated pickleball courts. I'm not going to go into it because my time is probably up.
It's well up, but I'm letting you carry on.
And I thought I was a fast talker. But I was just talking about Surrey, 518,000 people. They've got 74 courts, 32 are permanent. Langley City's got 29,000 people, got 8 dedicated courts. You do the math. The township has 145,000 people. If you do the math from what Pickleball Canada said, there's 4,000 people in the township that play pickleball. We have 4 courts. That's 1,000 per court. That's a bit of a wait, wouldn't you say, between games? So that we've got a lot to do. Just in conclusion then, I'll be very quick. The township is paving the way as a leader in sport. I point to this article you've all seen, that you might have a copy of, The Leader. I actually went yesterday to the township to do a bit of a walk. They were playing field lacrosse, soccer, kids were playing, but guess what? There was 8 sand volleyball courts nobody was using, 8 basketball courts, and 4 tennis courts were empty. The day that we had yesterday, if there was pickleball there, those courts would have been used. We have the space. We can do this. We just need to realize what the future is. It's not tennis, and I get how those sports are important, but the future is pickleball. We're all getting older, and that's all we can do now. So just in conclusion, I'm going to leave it here. It's a popular and growing rapidly. This sport is not slowing down. Great for all demographics from 6 to 86. Promotes a healthy lifestyle. It just does. Better use of space. Limitless economic benefits. I just gave you that St. George example. Community bonding. And this one's really important. See these people here? We got to keep them off the streets, okay? They're scaring people. And the last reason is this game is so darn much fun. Thank you very much.
I do have some questions from council. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation. Kind of building on Councillor Kuntz's question, with no formal league, and for somebody like, I'm thinking of my dad, who's former high-level athlete and probably coached against you in Steve Nash basketball.
Probably did.
How do somebody like that get involved for the first time? Is the best way to go through a rec class like yours, or is it show up at the courts with a hand-me-down racket
just so
one
you
day?
know, I'm doing 5 classes now, and I probably got to leave here in about 15 minutes because I got a class. But I'm doing 5 classes now, totally full. February 14th, if you're interested, get on the computer. That's the next round that's starting after spring break. I think they want to move it to 7. I'm only one guy. I'm supposed to be retired. I love doing it, but teaching 5 classes is a lot. It takes a lot out of you. So that to me is the best way. Unfortunately, when I tell these people to play, they love the game, they want to play it. I have to say, well, you can't play here. I'm sending them to Surrey and Abbotsford and Pitt Meadows because there's just no place to play here. So I think that is the best way to start. I'm hoping that more people get certified because the township needs more teachers like me. We really do. I've got me and a couple of volunteers that do it, and they wanted to do it in Aldergrove. I don't like driving anymore. It's too far for me to go, but that's the idea. We need more people, yes.
So you had to get certified through the township to be able to?
No, I certified through Pickleball Canada.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was a requirement, but I have that certification.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge that more people aren't actually getting certified to teach as well. So it's just...
We need more people to teach, yeah.
Thank
And
you.
there's private lessons, but it's expensive. The best way to learn, and what's nice is for everybody out there, they're offering an intermediate course starting after spring break for beginners plus who already have a basic knowledge of the game and want to take their game for a bit farther. So,
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Van Popta.
Yeah, I'm going to venture out on a limb here and probably peg myself as the least athletic person in this room.
well, you haven't met Harvey.
But I'm a pretty good dancer. I'm a pretty good dancer. But I must admit that I have actually been really intrigued about pickleball, probably for the last year that I've been hearing about it. So just a couple questions about for you. How big are your classes?
They're 12.
12?
That's only because of the space that we have.
And you do it at the Walnut Grove?
Walnut Grove Community Center.
Okay, okay.
I wanted to do outdoor, but there's no place to do it.
Okay.
Because it really is an outdoor game.
Well, yeah, and that was part of my question too, is because somebody like me who's curious about it, what, like in St. George and even here, what do spectators do? Like, do we bring our own chairs, or what kind of facilities are required for spectating, especially if we would ever host tournaments?
Well, here's my hope and the long-term goal if we decided to be the pickleball capital of Canada. And I did fail to mention too that I just got the stat that came into my head. We have 13% of the population. Yet in British Columbia, we have 30% of the pickleball players. So that's another thing, and it's obviously because of our weather. So, sorry I got off track. What was that question?
Yeah, no, just like how
Oh,
how
what
do
you
we how do
bring?
we
Well-
support spectators if we're gonna
You
if we
do.
get to tournaments
well,
and
when
like
it-
that?
St. George is a classic example, and I'm all for, if council is willing to go ahead of this, Bill and I are real cheap, we're free. You can use both of us as resources on where to go, what to do. I've been around this game a long time. I know what it needs. You need washroom facilities, lights are a bonus. They have lights down in St. George. They're playing first thing in the morning to late at night. A cover, because it
Do you
rains.
need like bleachers or areas for lawn
Well, they
chairs?
have
or-
bleachers there.
Okay.
I mean, in order to host a pro tournament, you're required to have so many things.
Okay.
All the tournaments currently now are done in Surrey. Surrey's getting all that money. Bill mentioned that, and I think Harvey told me this fact, that half of the players that came and played in that tournament where they gave the money were from the Okanagan or the island. So you're bringing in all those people, and they're spending all that money too, right? So yeah, you need bleachers, you need washrooms, you need windscreens, you need squeegees, but if you have a cover, there's other things you do need.
Okay, my last question is, I've heard it referenced a few times about temporary courts. What is a temporary court versus
Well,
a
to give you an
permanent?
example, in Surrey, they have what they call this metal lockbox, and they've got portable nets. So they leave the tennis courts out, and then if you go sideways, you can get 2 courts.
Okay.
And they just, the lockbox, people phone, they get the combination. A net's about $125. They got a couple squeegees. And so if tennis, and what they do in some places, they say tennis Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, pickleball Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You take out the net, finish, you put it back, lock it up.
Perfect. Okay.
Pretty cheap.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Bailey?
Talking to you guys and doing a bit of research online, I haven't heard one aspect of this that interests me, because I have played wheelchair floor hockey and I played wheelchair rugby.
Yes, they do.
Excellent, okay. And I have to correct you on the equipment. I would have to buy 2 new knee braces if I was going to play this. So, yeah, when the questions are finished, I've got a motion for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, seeing no other questions from council, and Councillor Bailey has advanced a motion, which we may as well process now, and I'll have some comments as we debate that motion. Great, so thank you very much for the 2 delegations.
You're welcome.
Councillor Bailey, given the strong interest, maybe go ahead with your motion.
Yeah, so everyone's got a copy. I move that staff report to council on possible sites for pickleball courts. Further, that sites include schools be identified for the future locations of new pickleball courts, mindful of possible conflicts with nearby users and residents due to sounds coming from pickleball courts, and I don't mean groans and owns and all that, and that costs be associated with construction of pickleball courts be identified.
It's moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rampopta. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Bailey?
Yeah,
you wanna
if I
do
can,
some-
and when they're looking at possible sites and all that stuff, I'm really mindful of the tennis people and that. So if you can have a look at what was suggested by both the speakers there, and be mindful that we don't want to, yeah, I got to do that censoring thing. I don't anger the tennis people inordinately, but yeah, we definitely need more courts. And if it's going to work, conversion, yeah, I'd like that to be considered also.
Councillor Martins?
Thank you. Yeah, I fully support this motion. I think it's much needed. Just the interest that's shown up here, I mean, that speaks to what our community is looking for. A question, if I can, through the chair to staff. Do we already have plans for some pickleball courts? I had thought perhaps that the community center planned or being considered in Yorkson area, there might be some interest in that?
Mr. Backen?
Yes, Mayor Woodward and to council. In our new plans that are just beginning for the new Willoughby Community Center, which are in a very early stage of design concepts, we have planned for gymnasium space and are taking pickleball courts into account for that space indoors.
That's excellent. Thank you very much.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, I think that this is really interesting. I have one goal here, that I want to learn pickleball so I can beat my brother. And I don't see any, what was the word used? I don't see any older people in the audience. I mean, they must be still at home. If I may, all it does is it's an excellent motion. And I think this is the idea that Councillor Martin's already suggested what we could do with the new buildings we're building. But, my son played an awful lot of what they call ball hockey. And a lot of the rinks throughout the whole region and the country, played at a national level too, they were called dry space during the summer months. And I was wondering, that's another opportunity to look at dry space, look at rinks. And also, I never realized that turning it sideways, I usually think about that, is you can turn 2 tennis courts into pickleball. And I understand the lines may get in the way. And also, there's also things that they can put up a portable or something. So there's all sorts of things we can do. And if it's anything that we can get people doing things that are important, like health related and getting people social related and people getting doing other things, after this crazy COVID's over, obviously, and we're moving forward, I think that's a good idea. So this, amongst other things, it's important to get the public out. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Bailey for bringing this motion forward. It is absolutely clear to me from what I see here today, this is totally needed. And I was intrigued to hear about the sports tourism draw. I really appreciated what Mr. Mercer and Mr. Annan told us about. And so I would like to definitely support this. I will definitely support it, and I hope that staff will also, in their report back, talk about the sports tourism. That's been a focus of Langley Township for at least a couple of decades now. I'd like to see this get included in that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm seeing other speakers. I want to thank Councillor Bailey for advancing this as quickly as you did. You know, I've had a couple conversations with staff as well in regarding some potential locations for pickleball, given that we typically want to see them spaced away about 100, that's the recommended, but maybe more like 200 meters away from residential users. And that does lead to some complications, but as the delegates noted, there's some great options for McLeod Athletic Park, Langley Events Center, an indoor expansion as well. So if we're talking about 2 dry floors that are going to be under construction at the LEC very soon, I've asked about potentially accommodating pickleball, not only in gymnasium space that may see some users relocate to that new facility, maybe free up some indoor space at the LEC, but also some other options at the LEC where we're not going to eventually see condominium or townhouse development directly across the street, but think for the long term of where we're going to locate these courts. So I think we're definitely a little bit behind on pickleball. I think that that's definitely the case. And it's a good reminder, but also a good bit of a wake-up call, which I think is always healthy and great. The conversations are ongoing, but this process will formalize it into a staff report, get us some options and get us some budgets, and potentially work it into a number of renovations that are being contemplated by this council for Walnut Grove Community Park, for Noel Booth, potentially for McLeod, but also for Langley Events Center and Aldergrove Athletic, where maybe you see some spots of these parks maybe underused and could be potentially repurposed, where we see that proximity from residential, safe and healthy distance from residential will not lead to conflicts and complaints that we've heard from other communities. Learn from that and find a long-term solution. So I expect this will be unanimous. I'll call the question on C2. That does carry unanimously. Next delegation. Next delegation, C3, Mr. Brian Harder, please come forward. And if people do want to leave, we can give a 30 seconds respite for that. Again, thank you very much for everything today. Yeah, thank you.
Get out of here. What did I say? What did I say?
Let's give it another minute or so. Okay, so just introduce yourself and go ahead, your 5 minutes. And if you need a little bit more, given I granted it to the others, happy to do that. But we are getting on, and if you could try to keep it to 5 minutes, I would appreciate that.
I'll do my best.
Okay, please go ahead.
So thanks very much, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Harder. I'm a 40-year resident of the township. I live at 248th and 16th, basically. I'm here to talk about the increased amount of truck parking on agricultural land. There's a group of us. I'm here representing a group of concerned Langley residents. There's some property owners, some renters in the group. There's owners of trucking companies, surprisingly. There's farmers. There's operators of agricultural tourism. There's horse farms. And altogether, we're just a group of concerned citizens. What we've noticed over the last several years, and being here 40 years, I've always seen the odd truck parked on agricultural land. It's not, there's been a few here and every once in a while it bubbles up and then it goes away. Over the last couple of years, it seems to have really expanded and gotten much larger. Our concern is the light industry. If you check the valuations of property, like my personal property is in ALR, but it's not farmed. So it's about $2 million, a little over $2 million for 6.7 acres. It's 2 doors away from 248th and 16th. There's this farm tax, fair enough. It's $13,000. Same side, and that's 4.66 acres. If you go to light industrial in Aldergrove, it's 19 million. If you go to Fraser Valley or Fraser Highway and Bradner, it's a little over 6 acres. It's $25 million valuation. So you can see there's a huge difference in valuation between farm taxes, even residential taxes, and light industrial. And so does it cost you less to park your truck on ALR land? Absolutely. To me, it's quite obvious. In particular, we're concerned about the dramatic increase on the ALR. Today, I'm going to highlight a few addresses. Not all of them. There's many more, but this is basically along 16th Avenue, and they popped up over the last couple of years. What do we want you to do? I want to stop and just recognize. I understand the council's done a lot. I read your press release from last week, and I appreciate the work that's being gone on. I think you need to go a little bit further, and I'm here to make sure you know that you're in the right direction. Okay? But we want the illegal creation of truck parks and depots in Langley Township on the ALR stopped, flat out. We're not talking about the 1 or 2 trucks that somebody parks on their property because they drive the truck and they live there. We want the illegal operation of the truck depots like the one at 248th and 16th to stop operation immediately, and the removal of the parking area, which to our knowledge was created illegally with the fill that was brought in. This is sort of bookends. This is 16th and 200th. There's 2 pieces of property there. It varies. Some days there's over 20 trucks parked there. This is 16th and 220th. You can see there's 7 trucks on this particular day, and it appears to be expanding. This is 248th and 16th. This is before the trucks moved on about a year and a half ago, I think it was 2 years ago. It was a horse farm and they did some tree farming there. This is it as we go, not today, but you can see they removed all the dirt and brought in gravel. The covered area to the right of the picture, that used to be a horse arena. It appears, I haven't been inside it, so I don't know for sure, but it certainly appears to be a maintenance building for the trucks. The area that's grass and there's the L shape of the gravel, that's all dug up now. Now, I don't know whether they plan to fill that or not, but I know the trees and the dirt's all turned over as if it looks like they're getting ready to expand further. This picture was taken last week or the week before. So that building on the right there is the one that I think they use as maintenance. When you drive by, even when I was driving by here today, there's about 6 tractors inside. Can't see what they're doing. I can guess, but I can't see. That's it at night. The lights are on and they're working away. They obviously think it's okay. And I say that because this is just taken off the web pages, right? They promote the 2 businesses that they run out of there. One is a logistics and one is a trucking company. Right? Now you go a little bit further. In this last year, this is right across the entrance from Aldergrove Lake Park, the main entrance. So that was it in 222, up on the left. On the right, you see they've graveled it, the trucks. If you go there, which I did this morning, where it says 222 on the picture, there must be 30 or 40 trailers there now, and that's all gravel. So it's expanding. And and I often say, and this isn't quite right, but when I used to work in the sawmill, nobody cared if you took a 2x4 home. So nobody cares if you park the rules 3, somebody parks 4 trucks for a day or whatever, who cares? In the mill, if you took a truckload of lumber home, you're losing your job. It's way past the boundaries. That's what's happening. Not on all the sites, but in a lot of them. And we need your support, your continued support, to make sure it doesn't go on, right? And so what do we want more from council? We want you to keep bylaws focused on the illegal trucks. We don't want authorize any fill permits. My understanding is that the 248th has asked for a permit for the fill retroactively. We say that should not be granted. And we asked that the ALR has the ability to issue a stop work order. That's what should happen on that particular site. It's gone so far over the boundaries, they've just made it into a light industrial. You know, when I say on the comical side, I live a block away or one property away. If you're gonna let that turn into a light industrial, I guess mine is too. Makes mine worth not 2 million, 19 million, right? Why don't I get it, okay? And I'm serious in that. That's the challenge. It's gone so far over the border, so. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, do have some questions. I did want to mention an update. I have reviewed, it's very recent, last couple of days, the public version of the document related to 24733 16th Avenue.
Yes.
They have had a court judgment registered against them, and they have 60 days to remediate the property back to its original state and cease all trucking operations.
Thank you.
So as we discussed when we met, there are timelines that there are just the court system that we have here in the province, and it took that amount of time to get that court order, which will give the township permission to enter and remediate if they do not.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Richter?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Harder. It's clear you've done an awful lot of research on this, and I appreciate you coming to council and sharing it with us. I have a couple of questions. My first one is, I've heard that Surrey and Abbotsford used to have a similar problem to this, but they have done something in the last little while that's fixed it and stopped it. I'm just wondering, do you know what that is, and do you think it would work in Langley?
So I don't know the details other than what I've heard is that they stepped up enforcement.
They stepped
They stepped up enforcement. One of the trucking companies that's in our group, they have a truck, they park their trucks in Delta, and I think, I'm nervous to quote the number, I think it was $20,000 a month they pay in rent. It may have been $20,000 a year, I'm not sure. I think it was $20,000 a month. But it would be much cheaper for them to just go buy agricultural land. There's another group that's in it that wanted to do it in Delta and realized that it wouldn't fit in the zoning and didn't, but it would have been much cheaper for them to just buy some ALR land and park their trucks on it. And they obviously can't do that, and they didn't do it.
Okay. And now, one of the issues that Langley Township has long had is we're what's called a regulated community for agriculture purposes. And this dates way back to mushroom farms, which was before my time on council even. But I'm just wondering, has your group reported these properties to the ALC?
I've personally reported this particular property.
Okay.
I'm told other people have reported other properties. I don't have a list of those.
Don't have a list. Okay.
I can get you one from the people, but I know I personally reported this one.
Well, it would be nice if your group does have a centralized or coordinated list. If council could get a copy of it, that would be appreciated. Thank you very much for your time today.
Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, I just had one question. How many properties that you're aware of in the township that is seeing this increased parking on ALR land?
I'm told, I haven't done it to count myself, I'm told it's over 300. 300,
wow.
I mean, you drive around, if you drive down 240th, I noticed the other day, between Fraser Highway, it's probably about 24th and 240th, and somebody's got
multiple
15, 20 excavators and dump trucks and that behind a big fence, right? It's just the proliferation that's starting to come on.
Well, thank you for bringing this forward. Appreciate it.
Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you, Mr. Harder, Brian, for coming. And when I first saw your name, I remember all the work you've done with the back horse country folks and the trails and throughout the community. And Langley is, I guess, one of the horse capitals of the province and things like that. I did want to say to you, I did talk to one of your neighbors today, and another thing, I know you've showed in your slides, in your presentation, you talked about parking, but there's another thing about operations and noise. Could you comment on that?
Well, I mean, Personally, I'm far enough away that I don't hear the noise, but I can imagine if you're running a mechanic shop, which is what I think is going on in there, I don't know, the noise that would come out of that, and then the constant running of trucks, right? But luckily I'm far enough off 16th, I don't hear that. But for people that live, because across the street from there is I think they're 1.5 acres. There's about 6, it's more of a residential area, and they've got a trucking depot in front of across the street now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey?
Thanks for bringing this forward, Brian. I have personal experience on how long this kind of stuff takes.
Yeah.
We had illegal, not only illegal dumping, but illegal 16,000 square feet of concrete poured. And well, it took about a year. Remediation is not too hard to ask for because they had to tear up all that concrete and haul it away. So to remediate, if anyone suggests that to remediate these sites is unreasonable, no, it's not. Thanks.
And if I can just say, like very close to this property, less than 400 meters, I'd say, is Bertram Creek. And from where the gate is on 248th, right across the street, the storm sewers go across and go straight through underneath the farm into Bertram Creek or down the ditch into Bertram Creek. And the township and the province, because I live on Bertram Creek, has spent an awful lot of time educating all the farmers about how to protect the creek and how not to disturb the creek. And they've given incentives to maintain the wildness, shall we say, where possible, or to keep livestock off it. One oil spill, which can happen, which fair enough can happen on a farm as well, but more likely when you've got a whole bunch of trucks coming through, is not worth it. It's just not worth it.
Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I just thought of one more question, and I don't know if you can answer it, but if you can, that's great. In other jurisdictions, have you heard of them fining not just the property owners, but the owners of the trucks that are parked on those properties?
I have no knowledge. I don't know. I don't know how I would find that out, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you very much for your delegation and your work on this. I know that if you at any point have sites that you've identified in which you do not live within 500 meters, we have recently updated the council policy, as you know, that you can submit those to myself or Mr. Backen or Mr. Cooner or Manny Nat, and very likely could expect those to be followed up on. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate work.
Next delegation, Ms. Dr. Christine Bishop. Please come forward.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time today. My name is Dr. Christine Bishop. I'm a biologist. I'm a director on the board of the Little Campbell Watershed Society. I'm a 20-year resident of South Langley. I'm here today to raise awareness of the potential impacts of illegal truck parking on ALR lands in the township on the Little Campbell River, which is one of the most endangered rivers in BC. So in front of you is a map of this river and the watershed. And I'm guessing that you might have to squint to see the river itself on this map because it's so surrounded by human development. The red line is actually the boundary of the watershed. The river mouth is at Semiahmoo Bay, and the headwaters of the Little Campbell River are in the township of Langley around 248th Street. So the river travels through Langley, travels through Surrey, and ultimately empties into Semiahmoo Bay. I guess I can. So this is one of the few rivers left in Metro Vancouver where we can brag that, at least currently, that salmon actually spawn in this river. For example, this is a coho salmon. So for the survival of this species and others, it's the quality of the water that comes into that river and the quantity of the river, quantity of water that comes into the river, into the groundwater, into the aquifers. And so that's what I'm gonna address today, is the potential impacts of truck parking on the quantity and the quality of this water. And as based on the red line that you saw in terms of the boundary of the watershed, it's what happens in the upland that potentially impacts what's going on in the river and the species that we value. So if you take a look at this graphic, there's many potential pollutants and stressors on urban rivers. But today I'll just examine some of the sources from vehicles. So this is a publication in 2019, and it's just a list and references to a number of studies that have shown that there are a lot of different types of chemicals that are coming off of vehicle traffic. Now, we all drive cars, there's trucks on the roads all the time. There's a lot of, you can see from the map, there's a lot of water crossings that this Little Campbell River has, crossing roads. But when you have a point source where there's a lot of vehicles parked, they're constantly going in and out, they're being washed, they're being there's maintenance going on these vehicles, on large vehicles. The potential for significant point sources, such as illegal parking on ALR, I think are very substantial. So some of this water is going to end up either running off as surface water, unless the land is completely flat, into water courses, ditches, storm sewers, but potentially directly into water courses, as Mr. Harder mentioned. So then we think to ourselves, well, you know, probably end up in maybe a stormwater detention pond, and maybe that's not so bad. But you need to have the realization that the water that ends up in a stormwater detention pond, most of it ends up in the river nearby. Some of the chemicals are going to bind with the sediment, but then in the end, you have a contaminated sediment situation. And many of these stormwater ponds end up actually being active wildlife habitat. So they have the potential for contamination of wildlife. The point is, what we need to do is keep these chemicals out of the water in the first place. Now, this is a paper that was published in 2019, and I just wanted to bring to your attention a compound that was recently discovered because out of 2,000 chemicals that were identified in waters and water courses around Seattle, this chemical, 6-PPD, was identified as a compound that's coming off of tire rubber that is toxic enough to kill adult coho salmon. More recent studies show that it's also embryotoxic to salmon as well. And this is a compound that's now been identified in Metro Vancouver rivers. So this is a situation where you have, and based on the pictures that you saw that Mr. Harder was showing, you have a situation where you have a lot of trucks. You may not have appropriate containment of contaminants. You may not have the appropriate parking situation. So you're running off through gravel into groundwater. So it's either going surface water or it's going groundwater. So because of these concerns, Little Campbell Watershed Society has come up with some suggestions for the council. Now, we're aware of your recent press release, and we support the enforcement that you're attempting to bring forward with a number of these locations. But just a step beyond that, I'd really like to see politicians really stand firm that the public land will not be provided for truck parking. So, of course, being a watershed society, we'd like to see more green space in the watershed. And we'd like to see that public land is used for the benefit of the larger community, not just subsidizing a single business type. Secondly, I think that they need to repeatedly remind the truck lobby that there is available truck parking in our municipalities, but you do have to pay rent. And this is based on speaking with people who are running trucking companies or truck repair facilities here in Langley or in Surrey or Delta. We would like to see the council consider changing bylaws in the township to restrict large truck use on residential and rural roads where possible, to reduce the access to ALR lands. Also, I'd like to encourage you to send more support up the line to the ALC, Premier, et cetera, on this issue, bringing them, making them more aware that it's become a huge issue in the Township of Langley. And I find it interesting that Councillor Richter is asking questions here about what are other municipalities doing. And I think that this is something that Township of Langley could really take the lead on. Because I think we all know that in Delta, Surrey, and Abbotsford, this has been an ongoing issue for a number of years, even over decades. They've addressed this issue in the ways that they can. And I think that a collaboration among the different municipalities to send the message to develop ways to work this issue out with the trucking industry and just be a leader would be really helpful. Maybe things are going on in back channels. I'm just saying that right now it's not obvious that the municipalities are working together. I think I'd leave it at that for now and take any questions that you might have.
Councillor Richter.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have, I think, about 2 or 3 questions here that have come up from your presentation. This map that you showed, where you talk about the watershed outline as well as the headwaters, has there been any work done on correlation between the number of these illegal trucking operations on ALR land within the map area here? Has anybody undertaken that work?
A correlation with the impacts on the river?
Yeah, so the new trucking things that are popping up, where are they popping up? And how close to the river are they?
Well, at this stage, I don't think they're always completely mapped out. But I know that a lot of them, and because I live in South Langley, and talking to neighbors, et cetera, and the group that Mr. Harder mentioned, is that a number of them are being established in the 16th Avenue corridor. And that's exactly where the river has crossings. They have crossings at 8th Avenue, crosses at 200th Street, 224th Street, 248th. So all of those locations are close to where a number of these sites. But in the bigger picture, I mean, I'm involved with the Little Camel Watershed Society, but this is becoming a bigger issue in Glen Valley, for example. Mm-hmm. There's other water courses in this township that are potentially being impacted. And anywhere where there's a water course near the site or sewers that are leading to these water courses potentially have these point sources as a problem.
Okay. Now, I know that the Little Campbell Watershed Society has been very active in monitoring the quantity of water and the points where there's choke points where water isn't getting through in drought seasons. But have they done any work, this 6-PPD, the oxidation of tires? Has there been any studies done on whether that contaminant, I thought I heard you say that it's in the metro rivers now?
Yeah, there's been work out of UBC that, not through local NGOs, but the UBC, where they are detecting it in rivers in Metro Vancouver. I don't think they sample Little Camel Watershed. I probably would have heard about it, or they would have shared that information with the Rasha, but it's among the sites that hoping to be sampled in the future.
Okay.
So I think that's important to keep that in mind because, people sometimes have said, well, have we had any fish kills in Little Camel that we can identify associated with this chemical? And at this stage, no. But because the more recent work showing that at lower concentrations, this can be embryotoxic to salmon. So you would never see a little dead salmon fry. They would just disappear.
Yeah.
So although we haven't had enough to kill adult fish, we could be stressing or killing embryos as well. I should add that in the course of being involved with this topic, I actually personally phoned the ALC last week and spoke to people there. And what I was told was that they have one enforcement officer for the entire Lower Mainland here, Fraser Valley. That their priorities are illegal fill, some of which is associated with this situation. So, you know, it's on the priority list for illegal fill, and then truck parking's down here. And I guess that moves it back to, you know, our own council and to work with other municipalities to encourage the ALC to hire more enforcement people. And that was the first thing that I was told was write to senior management. Don't just submit an enforcement request for an individual site, which I did. They said, you know, go to our website. There's a list of senior management. Write your concerns there. Indicate that there needs to be more enforcement on this issue or just more enforcement in general in the Fraser Valley. And I encourage the council to speak up to that as well. Okay. Individuals, as well as I'm actually meeting with Andrew Mercier on Wednesday to talk about environmental issues. And the first thing I'll be talking to him about is, why aren't you speaking up to the ALC for the township about this issue?
Yeah. Is there any group that Township Council could advocate to get more studies done on this PP6 PPD?
It's advocating. Well, I mean, let's just say research always flows where money is offered. And so if you want to know about water quality in your township, provide support, not just in words, but potentially in, you know, matching funding or even minimal funding that professors at University of Fraser Valley right here, University of British Columbia, could follow up and give you answers on that.
Thank you. Excellent suggestion. Appreciate your time.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and thank you, Dr. Bishop, for your presentation and all the work you do on this front. I've heard it sort of mentioned before that the impact that you know, our neighbor has had west of 196 on the river is so significant that kind of whatever we do on the upriver front is necessarily as important. Is that the case? Can you touch on how important the impacts upstream are on actually what comes out of the river?
I would absolutely not agree with that philosophy. First of all, you can see from the map, the headwaters here are here in our township. Secondly, I know that even though South Campbell Heights is going to impact the river, there's still going to be 1/3 of the watershed boundary going to be left as green space. And I know that there's groups such as the Russia who are working actively with the City of Surrey, as we are, to either expand that area or make it as high quality habitat as will remain. So, but then, you know, we have public lands directly upstream from that site that, you know, are critical to maintaining quality of water. And the area that the river goes dry is actually primarily in Langley. And that's not necessarily what Surrey's doing. It's what we're doing to the aquifer in terms of the quantity of water that's getting to the ground water that's able to support that river, and the surface water in terms of impermeable surfaces. So every new development that goes in, and there's going to be plenty in Fern Ridge, Brookswood, this should be a high priority in terms of setbacks, quality of what is going to impact on the river, and again, impermeable surfaces. But the water has to be high quality that's running through and over those impermeable surfaces. So there's still lots that we could do. There's still a rural area down in South Langley and in Glen Valley, for example. Development's going to come there. And as I said, a majority of the watershed sits in Langley.
Okay, great. And to build on Councillor Richter's point, I've had recently some conversation with the group that's running the most recent salmon study out of North Vancouver. And they mentioned that while they're not interested necessarily in themselves coming out all this way, since they're based out of UBC in North Van, if there was the capacity with some stream keepers or organizations in the region, they'd be interested in sharing tools and resources. Would the Watershed Society be in a position to take on some of that work?
Well, we'd be in a position to potentially collect the water samples for them. But you have a group yourself, Langley Environmental Partners, and they are very experienced in collecting water samples for looking at fecal coliform issues. And the work that they've done has been really effective at identifying point sources, working with landowners, and making a difference. So they certainly know their business. They work for you. We'd certainly help on a volunteer basis. Arasha has a very experienced and high-quality research team, actually, especially in Paul Simonon that they recently hired. He works down with the Semiahmoo Fish and Game Group, and they've been sampling along with LEPs for fecal coliforms, and so there's lots of expertise in the watershed to build on.
Great, appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey?
So there is a need for legal truck parks. And I'm just wondering if you build legal ones that are conforming to all the things like the ALR and that, is there a way, or is the technology there now that whether it's impermeable or permeable surfaces, that they can be built in a way that the runoff can be controlled, directed, and then put through some kind of filtration system? So when it does come off these surfaces or goes into the ground, that these 6 PPDs can be filtered out?
Yeah, excellent question. And I don't have all the answers for you, Councillor Bailey. I know that there have been legal truck parks built in Delta, for example. I don't know what containment systems they have, but they do have systems. And there is some monitoring done. So yeah, I don't know the engineering aspects of that, but certainly that is quite possible. And I think it's really necessary. And I'd like to raise that issue because in my hometown, Hamilton, Ontario, they have a huge issue with fire retardants from fire facilities running off into creeks and contaminating the wildlife. So we should keep that in mind for any fire halls that we tend to plan to build in the future near rivers.
Funny you mentioned that to me. I just happen to know about PBDs, which are you're getting at, and I know there is technology to try to deal with that, especially down in the States. They're very accountable for runoff from fires and that. But if
so, I think it's possible. I think again, if I can go back to the need for staff, the council, to be talking to your fellow municipalities, and frankly, not needing to ask people, no offense, but people in the public about the answers should be coming to you, and the expertise should be here. And I think even though these other municipalities have dealt with this, it's on our doorstep now, and I think the township mayor and council can be real leaders here, because if it doesn't go here, that's going to go to Chilliwack, the next one after that.
Yeah, I bring this up because I live on well water, and a big deal is filtration through the soil is so important. But there's an awful lot of contaminants that will come off of truck parks, like you alluded to, and that there's got to be some way to build them and contain and treat.
Yeah, I'm totally in support of that, and I think the Watershed Society is in support of that, and that's why we're here today.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bishop, for coming. Thank you for all the work and the committee work you've done and scientific work you've done for our community. It's most appreciated. I did want to say that, you did talk a little bit about, and I'm not a scientist myself, about the fact that water levels being by, I think with the region, my work with the region as well, Metro Vancouver that is the fact, we've had these droughts, for the last couple of years. A lot of, even my trees on my property are dying where they had no problem whatsoever before. The species, I guess they're asking from the garden shop not to plant certain types of species because they can't take, we're expecting another drought this year. I think it's important when you meet MLA Mercer and other MLAs to keep hammering him and others on, use of agricultural land and how it's used one way or another in trucks and examples of, and there's only so much power we can we can do within our regulated community and keep on top of them, keep asking for follow-up meetings and things like that, because we don't want it to go unnoticed or forget about this last week's news or something, just to stay on top of it. So those are my comments, if I may.
Okay, thanks for your support.
Great, thank you for that. Seeing no other questions from council.
Thanks.
Thank you. Delegation C5, Rupi Kainth and Manny Gill, please come forward. Great, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Woodward and council members for taking our request. I just want to bring something up to your attention. It's about the impact and understanding the bylaw preventing single-family subdivisions in the Township of Langley. I know it's something new that's come up in the last month or so. I understand that the vast majority of developers that have single-family applications in will likely go the route of changing direction and doing townhomes, just because the additional density will allow for higher profits and margins in their projects. There's a particular project.
You don't have to lean into it. You can just lean back and speak normally. I'll pick you up.
Yeah, there's a particular project, project number 0814-0227, where third reading was passed in 2020 of May, and 11 single-family lots were approved, or PLA was done, and third reading was done, and a servicing agreement was kind of drafted. Seven different families have purchased lots in that subdivision to build their single-family homes in 2020. And now with the upcoming potential changes of allowing developers or giving the option to people or forcing developers to no longer develop single-family lots, essentially puts these families at risk of not being able to build their single-family homes. Representing the group, we've invested a significant portion of our life savings, and the losses are going to be north of $3 million, with each family losing up to $500,000, just given the fact that these purchases were done in 2020, and having to find a comparable property now in 2024 is significantly more. Also wanted to mention that in this particular parcel, there is a road that is required to go through it as well. So changing direction to doing townhomes doesn't necessarily make sense, just because of the road requirement on this parcel. Essentially, we're just asking that the township and council take into consideration and allow development applications that are already past third reading to continue on a case-by-case basis. If the developer has already committed to selling single-family lots to families, and families have already moved into the area like ourselves, our kids are already in schools nearby, since we've been waiting for these lots for almost 4 years now. Just take that into consideration and allow certain applications to continue on a case-by-case basis, and essentially not give developers a way to frustrate their obligations because of what's happening with bylaws and provincial legislation. I know that this is obviously a complicated matter with what's happening with the provincial guidelines that are coming into play, but I wanted to make sure that you all understood that there's other implications of people that have already made commitments for their families financially, based on things that were past third reading many years ago.
Great. I have a couple of questions from council. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you if the developer has indicated to you that this is definitely something that they're going to pursue, or you're just concerned because of the recent legislation?
Yeah, in this particular case, the developer has indicated to us that they want to essentially frustrate the contract and go with townhomes instead of single-family lots, because obviously the financial gain is in the millions for them. So they've committed contract prices to us from 2020 that essentially they'd be able to get out of if this is a requirement from the township that, hey, you're not allowed to do single-family lots anymore, you have to do townhomes. And we're essentially saying that, is it possible to allow this to be looked at on a case-by-case basis? Like, I think most developers probably would, go the direction of doing townhomes, but in cases where they've already committed and sold the end units to families, we just feel like there could be some consideration potentially. Also, I know that in the Willoughby, Central Gordon area, there's very few single-family lot applications in place anyways.
Yep.
The vast majority, I think like over 90% of them are for multifamily. I think like 7% of applications right now are single-family. So it doesn't seem like people are going to be focused on developing single-family moving forward anyway.
Great, thank you very much.
Councillor Victor?
Yeah, so you already received, or the developer who's building this for you already received approval back in May of 2022, I think I heard you say?
Something along the lines of those dates, yeah. Their third reading was done, I think, in 2021 or 2020. And then essentially they've been waiting for a neighbor to bring the services to the site so they could service the site. There was an alternate plan available for them to bring the services themselves, to have finished this many years ago, but they elected to wait for the neighbor, and that in itself has already caused all the families a lot of financial losses, just waiting 3 years longer than what was initially promised. And essentially now, if they are not allowed to develop the single family lots, it just provides them an out for having to deliver the lots.
Okay, so this group of, you say there's, what, 7+ families in an 11-lot subdivision?
That's right.
Are the 7+ families like right beside each other, or are they kind of all over?
They're pretty much right beside each other.
Right beside each other. So if you wanted to proceed with yours and you ended up with townhomes or fourplexes or whatever, sixplexes, whatever it is that they're allowed now, would you be okay with that? Surrounding your neighborhood?
I mean, I think that's a tough question. For us, we're all building our personal homes there.
Yeah.
We don't have any intention to do fourplexes or duplexes or anything like that. I think the reality of the new provincial guidelines coming out, whether it's going to be in our control or if we like our neighbors building fourplexes or duplexes, I think is going to be maybe an issue that's outside of the scope of this particular situation.
Well, I don't think so. I think it's got a bearing on this because if yours proceeded with the 11 lots, you might be an island surrounded by little mini towers. Like, are you okay being an island surrounded by little mini towers?
At this point, with the losses being, almost like $500,000 for each family, I think if we can just, get our homes and be able to move our families into there.
Yeah.
And if there's development happening, I think the neighbor is developing townhomes. And then on one side, it's a through road anyway, so there's no neighbor on the other side. I think the vast majority of the development in that neighborhood is townhomes anyway. As far as if there's going to be towers there, I don't think it's anywhere close to rapid or...
No, it's not. I'm not talking like 40-foot skyscrapers. I'm talking like maybe 4 stories.
I think there are already a lot of applications for 4 stories along 72nd Avenue.
Yeah.
I think that's just the reality of what's kind of happening.
So you'd be okay with having, like, you're just saying, let our 11 units proceed forward?
I wish I would have actually put together a presentation, but backing onto our property, there's already a 44-unit townhouse site.
Yeah.
And backing onto them, there's already an 88-unit townhouse site. So, and on the other side of ours is a through road for 71B Avenue.
Yeah.
So for us, we would be fronting onto a road with neighbors that are already high density.
Okay.
And we went into the purchase knowing that there's going to be townhouses surrounding the development.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of times a loss of $500,000 per family. Can you itemize the source of that loss, please?
So we purchased the lots in 2020. Lots were around $800,000 or $900,000. A comparable lot in today's market is $1.3 million.
So the loss is in resale value of the lot purchased.
And essentially, like, we would have to try and find another home or another lot to go and build our homes on, and we would be now purchasing them for $1.3 million, as opposed to what we paid in 2020, which is $800,000 or $900,000.
Okay. And so the concern with the provincial legislation is that once the single-family subdivision is created, the legal lot is transferred to the buyer, they could simply build a 4-unit apartment building, and the township could not prevent it. Do you have any suggestions for us?
I mean, in my particular case, I'd be more than happy with, some sort of covenant on there. Like, we don't have any plans
We're
to.
not permitted to put a covenant on the title.
Yeah. So, I mean, in our situation, we already have our plans made. We have our structural engineering done. So, we're all building our single family homes. As far as what the city could do, I'm not sure. I know that every other home that's already single family zoned, is going to be able to do fourplexes and stuff like that. Whether or not that is going to actually happen or make sense, I think it's something that I'm not too sure.
It'd be interesting to poll the other families, because I think this is going to be debated by council a little bit later. And your delegation, I think, is very helpful, and I thank you very much for putting a face to the correspondence. The challenge being, of course, that why would a buyer of a lot of that amount, which you just mentioned, put a single-family home on it when they can put 4 units on it? Why would someone do that?
I think the other thing is that most of the homes that are 5,000 square foot plus, they already have a single suite, or a lot of them have 2 suites. So there's typically 2 or 3 families already living in a lot of those homes. So as far as the number of families being able to move into the home, I don't know if it changes much. I understand that a duplex or a triplex or something along those lines is obviously different. You'll have different legal titles, and I know it's a complicated matter. I also think that the vast majority of developers will probably elect to change direction and do townhomes or multifamily, because obviously the money is way more. And in the past, you would try to go for higher density, and they wouldn't necessarily allow you to go for higher density based on the zoning. So I think this is welcome news from the development community. It's just in cases where an application has already gone past 3rd reading and subdivision units have already been sold and committed to families, I feel that if there's a way to allow some of those on a case-by-case basis to continue, which I don't suspect there would be many, just because I feel like most developers will elect to go townhouse route instead of single-family route.
Councilor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been following the correspondence on this one with interest, just because there's some interesting nuances to this one. So if I read between the lines, if the developer received 3rd reading a couple years ago, it sounds like he's already trying to frustrate the contracts with you. And so regardless of what we do here with your application, it sounds like he's still going that route. So even if we could guarantee that this could be a single family neighborhood, it sounds like he's still trying to frustrate the contracts by not bringing in the services. So I'm wondering, through your worship to staff, if there's a way that we can, regardless of what we do with this particular, one-off situation where people have sold and it's been at 3rd reading for a few years, is there something that we could do in regards to getting services to these sites?
Yeah, something that we can certainly review when the issue's debated. That would be the time for the questions, not while the delegate is here.
Okay.
Any other questions for the delegation? No, seeing none, I want to thank you very much for again coming and presenting us here today, and sympathize very much with the situation in the terms of the timeline for development, the economic shift, and people want to change things. And in regards to the challenge the township faces, it is going to be my position that the responsibility for what's happening clearly lies with the province. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, why don't we take a 5-minute recess and return for the agenda at 10 minutes after 3.
in, so you can't have nice things.
Okay, with that, we'll get back underway. Start with item reports to council, item E1, development permit application number 101366. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Rint. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Well, I'm excited to see some new housing built down in what I'll call downtown Brookswood. I think we can still do some pretty cool stuff down there, so I do have a referral motion if there's no other comments to council.
There is one other speaker, Councillor Richter.
Yes, I was just wondering if these units would be, if there would be any rental units or below market units in this development.
Mr. Bagan.
Through your worship, Councilor Richter, the applicant has not identified them being rental or affordable.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I've circulated the referral motion to council and staff, and it reads that the application be referred back to staff to work with the proponent on a design that incorporates development permit area B key guidelines of greater design variety and architectural elements that create visual interest, as well as the guidelines of significant tree retention. So moved.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think the
Go ahead. Strange. Go ahead.
yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think the motion itself kind of stands on its own merits, but I think that Brookswood as a whole, as it develops in that urban area, deserves as cool and different architecture as possible. And I'd like to see if there can be some work done with staff and the proponent.
Mr. Richardson, can you address the guidelines of significant tree retention, how that would be potentially interpreted by staff?
Thank you, Worship. So I think as identified in the staff report, there are 17 significant trees identified on the site. Majority, Your Worship, if I can get the other slide, I slide you up, I can maybe reference the site plan. Thank you, Worship. So as walking through staff, the majority of the trees identified are actually on 202 B Street. So there's a dedication required here for upgrades to the boulevard. So there'll be some effect of those required improvements for the road and associated boulevard works. The second set of trees that are significant on the site are actually in between the two buildings on the site, which are sort of indicated here as two existing lots. So on-site significant trees will be located here, which require some boulevard improvements, and central to the site here, which are between the two buildings. As noted on the site plan, the site's existing zoning C2 allows for commercial use on the ground floor and residential above, which is proposed in the application, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yes, I support referring it back to look at trying to protect more trees as well as design considerations. One of the things I was wondering about is, as it's got a fairly significant roof footprint, that something could be done for a rooftop amenity area for the residents in the building. If that could also be talked about.
Mr. Richardson, I don't know if you want to, I'm not sure if this is heading towards an amendment or you would like staff to answer a question?
No, I'm just saying it's to refer back to staff to work with the proponent on design variety. I think having rooftop amenity area would fall under design variety.
Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yes, I mean, I'm looking at two things. Mr. Richardson indicated, you know, to retain trees, I guess you can't put a building up or something, or it's difficult. And trees challenges regarding building has always been a challenge. Also, the next door neighbor seems like they got a lot of trees, and that's not affected in development. I'm very, very familiar with this area because my doctor's office was there for, 40 years, and he's retired now. So I am familiar with the area. Now, as far as design, I guess beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So I'm sure, I guess I don't really have any challenges with that. I guess we'll see what they can do. Those are my only points. Oh, my last point would be any tree that they take out, is there not supposed to be a, if I may, through the chair to Mr. Richardson, a policy regarding replacement, if I may?
Through your worship, to Councillor Ferguson, correct, the bylaw requires a replacement ratio of 30 trees per acre.
Thank you.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And these are all valid concerns. I think the intent is simply to try and work with the proponent to get the best application possible. I remember, prior to it shutting down, sadly, running through the area many times as a kid, going to the 7-Eleven nearby, going to the park, whatnot. And some of the trees on this site are some of the most significant in this urban part of Brookswood. And so I think it would be a great asset if we can try and find a way to build a mixed-use building here while retaining as much of the character as Brookswood as possible and enhancing that character. So if the proponent comes back with an application that meets these standards, then great. If not, then it'll be up to the council at that time to decide what we want to do. Appreciate it.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I thought I heard there's 17 significant trees. In the thing here, it says 9.
Mr. Richardson, can you clarify?
So, yeah, am I reading this wrong or sorry?
Mr. Richardson will clarify. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Worship. Yes, the replacement trees required 17, significant 9. Sorry if I misspoke on that point, Your Worship.
Yeah.
I reversed the two numbers in my head.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. Seeing no other discussion on the referral, call the question on the referral of E1. That carries with Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent opposed. Carry on to E2, request to host 2025 Provincial Curling Championships. Before we get a mover, Ms. Little, the recommendation is to consider. I think we'll just go straight to a motion for council to consider. There is. I'm trying to get it brought up. Yeah.
The recommendation is that council consider, but you can move it as to council pre-approve.
So I provided it to you already.
Yeah.
So maybe you could put it on the screen for council. You got to see it first, Councilor Ferguson.
Sorry.
Here we are. Council pre-approved $60,500 from 2025 prior year surplus or other internal sources to support the hosting of 2025 BC Curling Championships at GPRC set for January 2025. I'll move that. Is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Rent. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I was a little confused in the wording on this motion as to whether it was, just a second, I have to find it again. E2. Whether it was 6,000 or 60,500 or whether it was 60,500 plus 26,500 for the foregone fees.
Yeah, I had the same question, so I corresponded with staff over the weekend. Mr. Backen, maybe clarify for council.
Thank you, Your Worship. It is to pre-approve 60,500. The other fees would simply be absorbed by the township, and we would take that as being inherent in the motion that's before you.
Okay, and so do we do this for other groups that are bringing tournaments in? We absorb the fees for using?
There are special provisions for curling or for provincial championships. So on a case-by-case basis, council has in the past done these sorts of things, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, call the question on E2. Alternative. That carries unanimously. E3, Capital Crest 2024 Transit Improvement Grant Applications. Is there a mover Moved by Councillor Rint, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion? Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, reading the report, I see 40th Avenue multi-use path. South side is indicated to have delineator posts as well as a extruded asphalt curb. Just wanted to get some more information from staff on the delineator placement, if it's just around the turning and the intersections, or if it's down the whole south side between 200th and 204th. The only reason why I say that is because we have elevated curbs on 202A going up to RE Mountain. Even outside our building here on 203rd, we have elevated curbs. I think 72nd also has some, but none of them have delineators. So I just wanted to get some more information, through your worship, to staff on the reasons for them.
Mr. Bracken, Mr. Zwag, go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. Delineators that are being proposed on 40th Avenue are intended to follow a very similar approach as the 72nd Avenue, which is near driveway entrances, near intersections, so not continuous, or i.e. every so often meters, but at select key locations to ensure the pedestrian and cycling safety from vehicles leaving and crossing over the multi-use pathway.
Okay, yeah, because my only concern is that it's a continuous run, but if it's just around entrances and exits to intersections and driveways, I'm okay.
Okay. Councillor Richter?
Yes, thank you. I had the same question on this one as I had for the previous one. It's not clear from the wording if the 37,500 is part of the 415,000, or if it's in addition to the 415,000.
Thank you, through your worship. Focusing on the 40th Avenue or both grant applications for clarity?
Well, I'm wanting to know, are we approving 37.5, 415, or 37.5 plus 415 for a total of 452.5?
Your worship, I would like to answer the question as far as it's be 75,000, which is 37.5 in TransLink, Coast Mountain, and 37.5 from existing carry forward for just the bus stop improvements, and then an additional 415,000 for the 40th Avenue multi-use path, which is then comprised of 37.5 from Coast Mountain, 375,500 from existing township funding, and if successful, another $50,000 from the BC Alliance.
Okay. And this motion is definitely not clear. I think we need the bottom line of exactly how much money we're approving out of township coffers today, the total.
Yeah, the total from township coffers, being existing available funding, is 37,500 plus 377,500.
Okay, so it's 37 plus 377 for a total of the 415.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no discussion, call the question on E3. That carries unanimously. E4, capital request for firefighting equipment. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on E4? Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I did have a couple of questions on this, and my first question is, why would we take the 84,700, or yeah, 84,700 out of a planning study when it's to purchase firefighting equipment? Why wouldn't those monies come out of the equipment reserve fund that the fire department has?
Mr. Bracken?
Your worship, I suppose they could. In this instance, I think staff are projecting where there may be available funds, and as such, they're suggesting using those in the first instance. And in this case, because of the fact the equipment was ordered some time ago and has arrived, they're looking to actually make it as easy as possible from funding sources that would still preserve the larger amounts for other or later purchases.
Okay, and my second question was, the 84,000 that's being used for the equipment, for how many firefighters will this cover?
Good thing you're here.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Go ahead.
Through your worship, that should be approximately 30 sets of turnout gear.
Okay, and what about the rest of the firefighters? Do they already have the new protective gear?
Through your worship, that's correct. We do have a better plan in place with the help of council here, starting in 2024. And we do replace so many a year. The gear is good for 10 years, but we also want to leave some life left in it, so we have a replacement schedule. And also due to calls being increased and training increasing, there's more wear and tear on the gear. Once the gear expires, it's pretty much no longer useful for our members.
And from what I remember in the 2024 budget, there was an allocation of approximately $155,000 for this purpose.
Through your
for
worship,
existing,
that's
for
correct.
existing suppression firefighters.
Which I think will really help get us back on track on that replacement schedule.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Martins?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Chief, for being here. I fully support this request. My question's more about the different budget envelopes here. The fire hall feasibility studies, I thought they were completed. I'm just wondering why there's funds still sitting in that account.
Mr. Bracken? Simply surplus what's within the fire
That's
budget,
correct.
but
That's correct. So those are funds that were budgeted but not need to be utilized. As such, they remain in the account till there's a year end, and then they would go to surplus. Here, we're suggesting the transfer of them to satisfy these needs.
Okay, so we will be winding back this particular account then and moving the funds over down the road? Okay. I'm just wondering if there's a way we could assist with these sorts of requests. This is coming forward to us just because we need to transfer funds between one and the other, that we could give the chiefs more autonomy with regards to these sorts of payments when they come up.
Present transfer levels require council's support at $50,000 or more. We could look for the chief at least to change that to $100,000 if that was the desire of council.
Yeah, thank you, and I'll wait for other people to speak, but I would like to move that. Well, we increase that to 100.
Councilor Bailey?
Know a little bit about the importance of PPE and how fast it wears out and what some of the testing that's required on it. And the fact that, Chief, do we have second sets of gear for the firefighters?
We do not. Through your worship, we have some spare gear, but there are departments that have a complete second set, just for training or for operational.
Can you tell us what the difference would be between having spare gear and a second set of gear?
Essentially, it's dedicated to that member. So you have your operational set and you have another set that's for training, et cetera.
So you just hope that the spare set of gear that you pull out of a truck is going to fit?
That's correct.
How many measurements are taken on a set of PPE for when you're getting a set of gear for firefighters?
I believe, through your worship, it's 11 to 12 point measurement system.
And is one of the considerations called a rate of rise?
That's correct, through your worship.
Yeah, to clarify that, what does that mean, Chief?
Essentially, through your worship, you want to make sure that you have the best fit so that you're not getting exposed to anything that's bad for you, essentially.
Would it also involve, boy, I'm trying not to say this in firefighter language, extreme wear in certain areas of your body, like your crotch?
Through your worship, that's correct.
A level of detail that's definitely required.
Well, the reason that is because some of us have experienced that, and when you're fighting a larger scale fire and you are raw, which happens when you have ill-fitting gear, that's what I really in the future want to avoid because, well, and believe me, I very diplomatically worded that in an unusual fashion, but it is a consideration that only firefighters can really know. And the fact that we don't have a second set of gear for firefighters is incredible. Okay, I'm trying to.
We're looking to the future, Councillor Bailey. We've had this conversation a couple of times. We're looking toward the future. Very supportive council that wants to be informed of these things and wants to help you solve that for the membership. I had a similarly educated by Councillor Bailey on this issue, so a bit of an inside joke going on here, but very important issue. I'm not downplaying it, but we trust that you're making the right recommendations to help the membership on things that are important. And again, we're looking to the future, not to the past, Councillor Bailey.
I'm really glad we're moving into the 20th century at least.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Chief, thank you Chief Roy. Thank you for coming today. I'm hoping that we don't have to see you every year. I mean, I know you're fairly new to our, is it a year now or not quite a year?
Not quite yet.
Not quite a
Your
year.
worship,
So it's, you're in a tough situation. And I too also, I'm not sure if what the best ceiling or the best working situation, because I wouldn't like to see you back here next year for something that, something could be established if you already have a ceiling. So my question through the chair to the staff is, would 100 be enough, or would we need, say, maybe 125 or 150 within maybe just the fire department or that type of thing, if I may, through a chair?
Your worship, given the age of the policy, I think if we were looking at it holistically, we'd probably suggest 150,000, but of course it has to be what's comfortable for council.
Yeah, I think those are things, Mr. Mayor, those are things we should look at. I don't know if you know.
No, I think it's a good suggestion, and maybe you could widen it to look at it from multiple departments and have a comprehensive report and make some adjustments to that threshold. I think this isn't controversial, in my opinion, to be moving money around for things that are very important, and I think we could potentially look at increasing that amount to leave these things to not just yourself, but other very competent department heads as well.
And regarding fire department equipment and measuring and all that, I'm going to leave an awful lot of that up to you. You're very capable fire department. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Chief.
Seeing no other discussion, Councillor Martins, go ahead.
Yeah, so just looking for some clarification here. As I said, yeah, obviously this is, we need to do this. But when we're talking about increasing the spending authority for the chief, do I do that as a separate motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that.
Okay.
So we'll dispose of the recommendation under E4. I'll call the question on E4. That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go back to you, Councillor Martins. Maybe we could widen it to review the threshold for all departments and get a staff report back for that, including fire.
So when you're saying all departments, you're saying every department in the township?
Mr.
'Cause I
Backen,
wasn't
maybe
wanting anything too robust.
Maybe Mr. Backen, you can just help us here.
I think it would just simply be review the limits contained in the current procurement policies for transfers, and then we could report back comprehensively.
But if you wish to restrict it to fire, that's okay too.
No, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to move that.
There's a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on having a review of that? I think it's probably appropriate township-wide. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Through you to Mr. Backen, do all the senior managers have the same level of discretion right now?
That's correct. They're all at the same amount.
Okay, so if we give it to one person, we have to give it to all people then, or all the senior managers? Otherwise, we create an inequity, right?
You'd be creating differences in that there would be, I guess, perhaps based on the value of the equipment or what the ordinary processes are. But council has the authority to do department by department, division by division, or comprehensively for all, I guess, director level positions.
Okay, and my final question is, have we had any problems in the past where we would need to increase the limits?
Well, I suppose the best example is before you today. We were looking at ways to try to simply, knowing the subject matter and knowing the importance of the equipment, looking for ways to actually try to advance this without having to come to council to proceed. But we thought in this instance it's best to bring it because it was certainly above the current levels.
Thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on that addition to E4. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Item E6, Booth, Fernridge, and Wren neighborhood plans. I think we buried the order at the beginning of the agenda. Yep. So while we're on item E6, we'll deal with Booth, Fernridge, and Wren neighborhood plans first, based upon the staff report. I think we'll just get to debate. I'm going to move motion number 2 with an amendment for council's consideration of third reading and final adoption within Q2 2024. So move that. Moved by Mayor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Rent. And I'll just mention that again. Item 2 with a timeline attached to the end. So it would read, update the Booth, Fernridge, and Wren neighborhood plans by revising or altering any plan components or policies that do not align with the small-scale multi-unit housing provincial legislation for council's consideration of third reading and final adoption within Q2 2024. Councillor Richter.
I've raised this before, I'll raise it again. Why has council not received, this is a pretty significant amendment and recommendation. Why were we not advised of it earlier?
It's in the agenda, Councillor Richter.
No, it's not. There's 3 options in the agenda. You've just moved 2 with an amendment to
I've
it.
moved 1 as amended.
You moved number 1?
No, I moved 1 of them as amended.
Okay, well, that's my query. Where's the amendment?
I moved it amended.
Okay, well, if other councillors are putting forward written amendments, why do you not have to put forward written amendments?
It's in the agenda, Councillor Richter. I determined
It's not in the agenda.
It's written right there, number 2, Councillor Richter.
Okay, number 2 plus
With a very
what?
inconsequential addition to attach a timeline for staff to get this done before the summer break, similar to last year.
Well, I still don't think you're treating all council members fairly.
You've made that very clear on social media. Councillor Kuntz, go ahead.
So with number 2, does that mean that any in-stream single family would not be able to proceed?
That would potentially, if this is adopted, that would be considered under item E5.
Considered, which means what?
That the dealing with third in-stream applications is actually applicable to item E5. So if council endorses revising the plans, that would inform the decision to be made under E5.
Okay, so I guess because I'm just trying to grapple with all of this. If we were to do number 2, then that means potentially no single family in Brookswood.
Mr. Backen, it would still be at the discretion of council.
That's correct.
Okay, so if we did say number 3, what would be, if you could help me, could we potentially do number 3 so it kind of leaves it open?
We could do number 3, or it could be moved, or it could be moved on to if item number 2 is not adopted by council.
And I noticed that it's December 2025. Like, is there a reason why it's like 2 years away? Or if we could maybe even change it to 1 year?
But that's not on the floor, but Mr. Backen, that rationale, I believe, was to leave the existing plans in place as an option for council to consider. I've moved item 2 as an option for the council to consider. So if that's not adopted, we could move on to other options, including number 3.
Okay, I'm just really, concerned about the people that are, have single family and that they're looking forward to moving into their homes or they're going to be built. So we're basically saying that potentially will not be a possibility.
I think that's a great concern to have. I'm concerned about neighborhood planning and doubling densities without sufficient schools or parks.
Yeah, I'm concerned too. So I'm not trying to be adversarial. I'm just trying to understand. That's all. So with number 2, then we're revising or altering any plan components. Probably.
So basically, we're revising the plans that are single family, portions of the areas that are single family. Maybe that changes there affect other components, but it is a revision to those 3 plans based upon what the province has done.
Okay, so but if council, if a application comes forward or a developer comes forward and said, hey, we still want to build single family, we can. We're not going to allow them to do that.
Well, that would be a decision at that time, Mr. Backen. That would either be an application advanced under the current bylaws, which are not being repealed, or it would be an OCP amendment to pursue single family over other forms.
Again, correct, Your Worship, yes.
And it would be adjudicated by council as an individual rezoning bylaw, an OCP amendment bylaw.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think for me, the biggest struggle with this recent swath of provincial announcements is just the uncertainty that it provides to not only us, but to the proponents as well. So when I look at the 3 options, I look at option 2, now that especially we could potentially see a expedited timeline on finalizing this. To me, the best way to actually finally have some certainty, because if we have this revision brought forward to us for our discussion, then we know, okay, well, based on the new types of homes being built in Brookswood, are we going to be needing new schools? Are we going to be needing more parks? So I look at number 2 as, yes, we are still sort of putting the brakes on a lot of different application types right now, but I think it's in the best interest long-term to do that so that we have some more certainty moving forward. So I appreciate the amendment. I think that it's obviously going to speed up the amount of certainty and when we can get it. I am curious, of the $51 million that the provincial government announced to assist with planning to various municipalities, are we going to be using any of our portion of that 51 million on this Brookswood process, or is that still to be determined?
To still be determined by council, Mr. Back, and I believe the 744,000 would be coming forward with hopefully a staff recommendation on how much of that is needed to comply with other elements of Bill 44 versus the impacts that Bill 44 has had upon certainty of densities in Booth, Rin, and Fernridge. So there'll be many pressures. We've also got to pre-zone a 20-year land housing supply. And we've got to consider Bill 47 and also create an ACC system under Bill 46. So 744,000 is a rather, I think, insulting sum in some ways, given the requirements of legislation. But so it simply won't cover the requirements, but we'll hopefully stretch it, Mr. Backen, as far as we can. Is that correct?
That's
yeah,
correct, yes.
it is a challenge, but whether it will go here or elsewhere is yet to be determined. The requirements of the three statutes are significant. And appreciate the commentary, and the intent of adding a timeline is simply to give certainty that this isn't a multi-year process, that we have an urgency to this, and we want to get these plans to where they are today, which is completed. And again, as I said to the delegate, the responsibility for this situation rests solely on the province. Councillor Ferguson.
Well, wow, I appreciate the comments by Councillor Pratt and yourself. I mean, that's exactly what I was about to say. We have this document also. It's quite a large document. I should have got it sent to me electronically. If I may, through the chair to staff, these, if this amendment, if I may, is to be item number 2 on the actual E6, if that was to go forward, if I may, what kind of impact would that have on the item that we have under E5, which is coming up next, if I may?
Mr. Bracken?
Your Worship, I think we'd have to look at them in tandem. It certainly is going to be a significant amount of work, but because we vetted these through the staff at this point, we can proceed as long as we understand that it is a priority.
Yeah, I do want to appreciate and compliment staff for the work they did putting through. This is quite a large and lengthy document, and it's obviously pressed on by the fact that we've got some challenges with the province. I want to thank you, and I appreciate the comments made by other councillors.
Councillor Victor?
Yes, I have a couple more questions through you to staff. Did we obtain a legal opinion on each of these 3 options? A written legal opinion?
We have been communicating with legal counsel throughout. I can't say it's specific to each option, but it's in the framework that we put forth.
Okay, so we haven't actually asked for a legal opinion on any of them.
We've been taking legal guidance through the process, but haven't been actually going beyond that and asking for something specific on each of these items.
Okay, I just don't want us to end up in the same situation that we're in now with a lawsuit against us.
That situation is resolved, Councillor Ricker.
I don't think it's resolved. I don't see that the legal suit has been withdrawn.
It's been stayed. It is
okay,
resolved.
Mr. Mayor, I have the floor.
You do, but you're
Okay,
sending information that isn't.
Do you want me to start signaling when you cut in?
The lawsuit situation is resolved, Councillor Richter. Please continue.
Well, I don't believe it is resolved.
Well, then
Mr.
you'd be
Mayor.
incorrect.
The second question that I had was with regards to the presentation that staff did on Bill 44 on November 20th. Were these 3 options included in that presentation?
Again, same process as with the legal counsel. They were generically talked about in terms of the challenges and opportunities Bill 44 presents, but at that point these were not yet developed, so we can't say that they were specifically recited, but they were contained, I guess, generally in the material.
Okay, well, given the significance of this particular motion, is there any reason why we didn't get a staff presentation on this today?
I think really just out of timing. It's a matter of trying to progress within the timelines that have been stipulated and the timeline set in Bill 44. Of course, it's always up to council to provide us with the direction through a resolution as to what we should do next.
Well, I find it disconcerting that we get very few staff presentations now compared to what we've had in previous councils. I think we need to have more staff presentations to explain the ramifications of each of these. Thank you.
Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, just one last round at this. Before I vote on number 2, I just want some assurance that the planning components or policies would include developers that want to continue building single family. So that would it's still possible, right? Like it's.
Again, those components would be considered. The challenge is if they're designated single family, that really becomes a fourplex. So we really lose our jurisdiction in that situation. So, and as the mayor pointed out, there's very few restrictions we can place on those matters. So we would be looking at some sort of holistic solution to this that will probably come from the process, but that we are just developing now.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Councillor Kunst, the way I see the challenge is if you wish to see the creation of more single-family homes, which we all saw, we adopted the plan. We have a lot of high-density development for different forms in Willoughby, and we anticipated some lower-density forms in South Langley. The province has stripped us of the ability to require single-family. So someone could get a single-family subdivision and put 40 UPA on it. There would be no ability to stop them or require school sites for that level of density or even require parking for that level of density. That is and again, this is the province that has done this. This is not anything that we are doing. Councillor Martins?
Thank you. And because I don't have the wording in front of me of your amendment, when did you say this would have to be completed by?
I believe it was for council's consideration of third and final adoption within Q2 2024.
Okay, thank you. And I would repeat what Councillor Pratt said. I think the most important part here is there's some certainty, and sooner than later, because there's this has certainly thrown everything into upheaval. So if we can track forward with a clear plan, I think that's great.
Okay, thank you. Seeing that, I'll call the question on E6, item 2 as amended. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Item E5, Bill 44, in-street development applications. I have an alternative as well, which I think is helpful. So I'll move that. There it is there. I'll move that. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rint. So that council refer development applications listed in Table 1 in our package here over the weekend, in-stream development applications with single-family detached forms back to staff to work with proponents with respect to Bill 44 density considerations for those development applications that are within the Booth, Rinn, Fernridge neighborhood plans or within the Williams neighborhood plan and do not provide rear lane access for further lot design considerations, and that staff explore options for voluntary commitments from proponents for certain density limits within new in-stream single-family subdivisions outlined within Table 1 as a condition of final adoption. So the process here is to provide as much flexibility for staff and proponents as possible to come forward on a case-by-case basis and see if, some can say that they're so far along in the process, they're not going to build fourplexes. Perhaps in some cases, we'll simply take their verbal assurance. Maybe that's the best we can do for things that are at third reading. Maybe that's the best we can do in some of these situations. This provides flexibility for each proponent to come to the table, either looking to proceed as is or potentially provide some other options. I think the concern is how our fourplex is going to necessarily work on front-loaded single-family lots that are of compact size. That's not clear. The legislation did not provide any examples of that I saw. There were a number of assumptions made about single-family forms in Vancouver, Burnaby, and other areas that aren't applicable in some of these applications. So this is really intended to not get into debating each one, but allowing staff to adjudicate them individually with proponents and then come forward on a case-by-case basis, hopefully with solutions that council can consider in each case. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And just reading this here, I just want to confirm that should any of the 18 development applications include a
28, I think.
28?
28.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so the 28 applications that might include a front-loaded single-family lot in Willoughby outside of the Williams neighborhood plan would not be included in this. Is that what I'm reading from this?
No, so the way it would catch it, if you're a front-loaded single-family configuration, you'd be caught up in number 3, and I think staff would like to work with the proponents to either explore voluntary commitments for exploring how single-family could proceed, potentially with voluntary commitments that are verbal assurances from developers we trust. And maybe that would be sufficient in some cases. You just move through the process for those that have third reading. But for any others, I think we got to start looking at if we're going to allow some that may end up quads and may not, that at the very least they have to have rear lane access.
Right. So number 2, when it ends with "and," that does not make 2 and 3 inclusive of each other. That is
That's
still
correct.
two
Those
distinct.
are development applications that have 1, 2, or 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I guess "and" could have been an "or." It is a bit confusing, but it's intended that some may have both apply.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Richter?
Yes, through you to staff. There, I see on page 3 of the report that there are 23 of these in-stream developments for single-family homes with a total of 356 units proposed of single-family. Now, if these were to convert to the Bill 44 standards, how many more units? Like, how many would the 356 go up to?
Mr. Baca?
So it would be a multiple of 4, so the 356 would be multiplied by 4 because this represents simply a 1. 1 times 4 is 4.
So 356 times 4. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
356 times 4.
Potentially.
And what would the total population be that would be generated as a result of this 356 times 4?
We can only go by averages in terms of how many homes people reside in a home, but Mr. Richardson, you've probably come across this more recently in terms of just generalization.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Backen. Further information pursuant to Mr. Backen's information there. So the mandated provincial legislation has a threshold of 280 square meters lot size, so that's 3,014 square feet. So ones that are less than 3,014 square feet would automatically be permitted to have 3 units, and ones above 3,014 square meters before, so that range would be 3 to 4 times. The average household size, I think, in the township for single-family detached is somewhere in the range of 2 to 3 persons per unit.
Okay, so we're seeing a maximum number of new units of 1,424 times 3, so an additional 4,000 population. Is that correct? Approximately? Okay, so 4,000 more people. How many more schools are going to be needed? Have we looked into that yet?
No, I think that's the challenge. The imposition of this upon us means we haven't been able to do those sorts of analysis, and it's the challenges that have been outlined previously, from schools to parks to amenity areas to fire halls. All those things are matters that now have to be considered in terms of the capacity of the infrastructure that exists.
Okay. And my last question is, same as I asked for the last one, did we get any kind of legal advice on this particular alternative motion?
Again, not on the motion specifically. We've been working with legal counsel throughout on Bill 44 from all sorts of various aspects, so we've had legal advice, but not specific to the motion itself.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Martins?
Thank you. Just looking for clarification on the wording here. In the final paragraph where it says voluntary commitments, staff are exploring options for voluntary commitments. What does that mean? Are we talking financial contributions?
Mr. Baca?
I don't believe so. I think what we're talking about is if we're looking at a different density or unit, we're looking for voluntary commitments. They'd have to be voluntary because we cannot impose them under the legislation, but we can work with the proponents to come up with unique, creative ideas that would better suit the neighborhood.
Okay. And one further question, if I can, through your worship to staff. What other municipalities, in, particularly in our region here, are following this path?
Again, each municipality has its own course. We haven't really monitored other municipalities at this point. Each are dealing with it in different ways, so I really don't know of any others, but we haven't looked for any others either.
Yeah, so you're not aware of any that are going this path? I just want to be clear, because, you know, it's easy enough to take business to our neighbors if this becomes too difficult for us, and that's my concern.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, through the chair, to staff, I mean, this is definitely a referral motion of the information provided to us for E5. And I mean, obviously, staff's got an awful lot of work to do with this, and you know, we've done an awful lot of work with the Brookwood neighborhood plans, Bruce, Ryn, and Fernridge, and also the Williams. Is there a particular reason, am I missing, that regarding the rear lane access? Would there ever be an opportunity where that would work? I can understand it can't work for anything, but ever an opportunity where it would work, if I may, through a chair?
Yeah, Mr. Bragg, maybe Mr. Richardson could help too on that.
Thank you, Worship. So the rear lane access and the where that our single-family rear-loaded lots are provided for typically have lesser front yard setbacks, increased depth of lots versus our front-loaded forms. So there's different configuration options that may be more reasonable and sympathetic to the neighborhood and maybe more accommodating for these types of multiple unit forms versus the front-loaded. So the motion here tries to achieve that and exclude the rear lane access and ask staff to work with the ones that are front-loaded for those considerations.
And if I may, through a chair to Mr. Richardson again, I mean, obviously, if you wander around either by foot, car, bike, or something else around many of the neighborhoods throughout the community, including Willoughby, you'll see a lot of really nice lanes with the garages at the back, and I know that that was part of what you wanted for design. Is this going to have, I think I already know the answer to this question, but this is going to have a huge, if I may through a chair, Mr. Richardson, a huge impact on, I guess, beautification or other uses of design, if I may?
Through your worship, to Councilor Ferguson, correct. Also, in terms of, as Mayor Wood had mentioned earlier, in terms of impacts on parking, that's another consideration with the front-loaded forms too. If you have driveways crossing front-loaded lots, you get less gaps between driveways as well. So there's some considerations there. Councilor Ferguson, you're outlining there, then their staff are grappling, and also the planning profession throughout the region to sort of deal with these items that are in the provincial mandate.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate all the things you and staff have done.
Yeah, thank you. Councilor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. And I know everybody else probably feels a similar thing when none of us anticipated having to deal with changes to this extent. Now, for me personally, I'm at the stage in life where I appreciate that the provincial government's actually trying to do something about the housing crisis. Now, as a councillor, obviously dealing with the ramifications of a policy that might work really well in the city of Vancouver or Burnaby or Richmond, where there's transit access and where there's predominantly rear-loaded homes that can be changed over time into these types of homes that the province is asking us to build, versus municipalities like ours, where we have to account for in our new neighborhoods a potentially drastic difference in density level. I appreciate that we're trying to maintain some flexibility through a motion like this with the development community, but also provide them, ourselves, and quite frankly, the residents who are often talking to us about how overcrowded the schools are, how poorly planned our roads are, et cetera. So I see this motion as a compromise and as a step in the right direction, especially considering the fact that we're dealing with something completely unprecedented in our part of the world. So again, I appreciate all the work that staff have been putting into all of these changes, and I'm sure over the next 18 to 24 months we'll be dealing with as well.
Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, call the question on the referral. E5. That carries. Councillor Richter opposed. F1, bylaws first and second reading, official community plan amendment, rezoning application number 100273, bylaw number 5971 and 5972 for 205 apartments. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yes, 3 questions for you to staff. Will these 205 apartment units on the 2.2 acres be rental or condo?
Through your worship, to date, the proponent hasn't indicated. To date, they are for sale market units.
Okay, and are green roofs or rooftop amenity areas being considered for them?
Through your worship to Councillor Richter, staff work with proponents to encourage those types of uses. This is solely a plan amendment and rezoning. Should the application proceed, the application would need a development permit, which would then come in front of council for adjudication, and those items can be further considered.
Okay. Yeah, they could be further considered at 3rd reading. What about, is this building going to be solar panel ready?
From recollection, your worship, council made some adjustments with respect to the building bylaw to accommodate those purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on F1. Carries unanimously. Item G1, bylaws for first, second, and third reading, revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw, or bylaw number 5986. Moved by Councillor Rint, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on G1? Councillor Richter.
Yes, through you to Mr. Backen. It's been a $25 million line of credit borrowing bylaw that we've done for many, many years now. I'm just curious as to why this has not gone up, like taxes have gone up based on costs.
I think the only reason is we have still not had to utilize it, so we didn't think it was appropriate to come forward with a revised number without having a rationale for it. The rationale therefore remains as it has been historically. It's an amount that we think is sufficient should we need to use it for the short term, and if that was not to be sufficient, we'd simply add a supplementary bylaw.
Okay, and do we have any time frame over which this would cover a short term? So in terms of our ongoing operating expenses, which include salaries and wages, how long would it take us to chew up 25 million?
Well, we would actually go through our reserves first and use this as a last resort. And I think the question is we would have to have it fully refinanced or repaid by the year end. So that would mean that we would be looking at probably a 2 or 3 month coverage, I guess, as revenues came in. So more specifically, this is really looking at the period from May and June, maybe part of July, until the money actually flows in.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question on G1. That carries unanimously. Bylaws for final adoption. I1, temporary borrowing bylaws. Sorry, did I miss? Oh, G2. Yeah, okay, so I know why I did that. Made that mistake. G2, rural plan amendment, Seven River bylaw number 5983. I'm going to move this amended to grant first and second reading and refer for a public hearing. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on G2? Councillor Richter.
Yes, I am going to support this because I do think it needs public input. We've had a couple of letters that have identified already areas of concern. I'm thinking D, the trail connectivity is something that needs to be looked at. I think it should be required, not considered. Water servicing, I think, needs to be looked at. And I'm just wondering, too, about sewer. What's going on with sewer? And finally, the spatial clustering. I think we need more definitive descriptions around that. But I'll wait for the public hearing, and I appreciate that there will be a public hearing. Thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on G2 as amended. Carries unanimously. Bylaws for final adoption, I1, temporary borrowing bylaw, strategic land loan, bylaw number 5981. I'll move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rint. Any discussion on I1? Seeing none, I'll call the question on I1. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. I2, official community plan amendment, rezoning application number 100274, bylaw number 5941, 5942. I'll move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on I2? Seeing none, let's call the question on I2. That carries unanimously. I3, official community plan amendment, rezoning application number 100229, bylaw number 5861, 5862. I'll move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on I3? Seeing none, call the question on I3. That carries unanimously. I4, official community plan amendment, rezoning application number 100271, bylaw number 5927, 5928. I'll move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And through yourself to staff, excuse me, through yourself to staff, question in regards to high density mixed use as a designation. Just curious if that includes the ability to use institutional uses within that building.
Mr. Richardson?
Broadly, yes, Your Worship.
Yeah,
Broadly, thank you.
Yeah. Now, my understanding, Mr. Richardson, is it broadly in the sense that commercial uses would cover much of the intention. Is that correct? Yeah,
That's correct, Your
that's
Worship,
correct,
and in the spirit of brevity,
Yeah.
that's my response.
Yeah, fair enough. Appreciate that. Seeing no other discussion, call the question on I4. That carries unanimously. I5, 2023 Development Cost Charge Bylaw, bylaw number 5897. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on I5? Seeing none, I'll call the question on I5. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. I6, rezoning application number 100748, bylaw number 5948, 5949. Is there a mover to that? Moved by Councillor Rent. Seconded by Councillor Kuntz. Is there any discussion on I6? Seeing none, I'll call the question on I6. That carries unanimously. What do we have here?
And the development permit.
Right. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on development permit number 101419? Seeing none, call the question on the development permit. Carries unanimously. That's interesting. Metro Vancouver Regional, anybody have a report, council report or a Metro Vancouver report? Seeing none, move on to item L1, just back on the floor. Ms. Little, is that correct? Given that it was a deferral?
That's correct.
That's correct. So I would like to refer this back to staff. Ms. Little, if you could bring that up, please. There we are there. So I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. The council refer L1 back to staff to propose for council's consideration council procedure bylaw amendments, excluding those specific to, yeah, that may be worded a little bit poorly, but excluding those other than agenda production, excluding those, yeah, I'm trying to think. So it's everything except agenda production and submission deadline amendments as proposed. Ms. Little, do you have that sort of intent? Yeah, excluding those specifics. So referring it back to bring it back without agenda production and submission deadline amendments. Is there any discussion? Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Why would we exclude the agenda production? I thought that was the whole purpose for a lot of these updates.
Mr. Backen?
The challenge that's becoming evident is that it's requiring the reports to be finished 3 to 4 weeks and be prior to the council meeting. So, for example, from the Christmas break, the reports would have had to have been completed by December the 22nd for the January 15th meeting. We think that's going to be very difficult, especially with some of the challenges we face with things that are arising from council business. So we're taking that and we're suggesting that be going back to its original form, and the rest of the amendments could then stand.
Okay. Another question that I have is the dates of enactment, and there's several listed on pages 4 and 5. Why do they say January 1st? It's already January 29th today. Shouldn't it be the day that this comes back for approval? final reading?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Richter. We should actually remove that from the referral as well, because that was going to be our start date for the new timelines.
Oh,
So I think what Ms. Little is saying is that originally we were going to have this effective January the 1st. When this comes back, there will be some housekeeping things such as the date by which it's effective, but that comes automatically. So this won't be obviously effective January 1st. It'll be effective from whatever date the bylaws adopted.
okay, so if this is being referred to come back without the agenda production amendments, whatever comes back will be effective the day it's approved, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm just wondering why we're replacing special closed meeting with closed meeting.
Previously, we did not include our closed meeting on the public calendar, and we do now. So a special meeting is used for when the public is not aware of a meeting, and because it was not on our calendar, that we always called it the special closed meeting. Now that we do have it on our public calendar that is posted in every year, we just call it the closed meeting.
Closed meeting, okay, thank you.
Councillor Martins?
Thank you. Just for my own clarification, and I appreciate what you've already outlined with regards to the challenges with the reports and how far in advance you have to get that information in. So if we're excluding this, we're going back to status quo where councillors receive their agenda package Thursday late afternoon, evening for me in my case. So I have exactly one business day to consult with anyone if I have any questions about anything I find in the package, and that's it. So that means I will have had to absorb a package that's typically several inches thick, read everything, understand it, form my questions and form my position on things, all with that very narrow timeline. And that is, so I appreciate the difficulty for staff, but it's also difficult for council, for us to be doing due diligence with our job on that limited time frame. So I wish there was maybe something in the middle we could do that just gave us a day or two more so that we could do our job well and feel confident when we come to the table that we have taken the time needed to govern best for our community.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that I've had a number of discussions with staff about what would work best, and I think, you know, giving them another chance to look at this again. I just think it's important. They spend a lot of time, a lot of pressure on staff to provide the information. Okay, so the agenda does come out on the Thursday, and I've had over the years, I've had a number of agendas. I've always had staff respond to me on any questions by email, text message, sometimes by phone call, and all weekend as well. And I'm surprised even the clerks were sending information back to me on weekends, and that they understand it's a council weekend, and we don't have as many council meetings as we used to have when I first started. And so it is an opportunity, and then Monday comes along for if I want clarification on other things. So I think it's not perfect, but I think it's an opportunity to look at it again. But it is a challenge, and I do appreciate all the work staff does. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on L1 referral. That carries unanimously. Is there any discussion on any items for information N1 through 8? Count N.
What about M1? I'd like to make a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Richter.
Thank you. I just, for the record, want to state that I did not support this particular motion because I felt it was excessive and extremely unnecessary. Thank you.
Is there any discussion on items N1 through 8? Councillor Van Popte, go ahead.
I just have a question through your worship to staff on N2. I noticed in the report that one of the applications was refused by the ALC, yet the secondary house was already built. What do we do in circumstances like that? And what is the implication?
I have to refresh my memory, but was that the one where they were looking for the stratification?
Yep.
Yeah. So if they're looking for stratification, it's denied. The zoning, the underlying zoning would still permit the 2 residences subject to size requirements, but they won't have a separate title. The separate title has been rejected, and I believe the reference was to concern about what the densification of residential uses in the ALR would do to effect on properties, neighboring properties and neighboring farms. So in this case, they'll be permitted to keep it, but it will be subject to the size requirements of the ALR, which I think is going to be less than 900 square feet, 1,000 square feet. So in that case, we would work with them. If it was in excess of that, we would work with them to achieve the reduction.
Yeah, because it's a fully sized house. So aside from, you know, dismantling the house, it's going to be over the 900 square feet that's permitted on ALC. So I'm just more curious how we're going to address that.
We would be working with the ALC to determine what their direction is in regards to that, because they've actually made this decision. And there's sometimes there are other conditions that they provide us with us, but we're not aware of any. They're not contained in their report.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. And just in regards to N3, the Transportation and Mobility Strategy Project update, just wanted to express my thanks to staff that the amount of outreach and engagement that they're proposing to do is pretty comprehensive, and I'm pretty excited about what that might entail.
Great. Councillor Richter?
Yes, I wanted to speak to N2 as well. And now that the house is built, what happens to it? Does it just sit there vacant until, or do they have to reapply to?
So again, it's a bit tricky because the underlying zoning permits 2 dwellings. The size restrictions that come into effect are if the ALC determines it wishes to regulate the use. As you're probably familiar with, they have recently determined they wish to regulate subdivisions and have traditionally not regulated use. So the question would become then, given the size of this building and given their position on regulating use, do they require it to be reduced? And if they do, it would be then down to the 1,000 square feet, which would then be automatically permitted.
Okay, so how long before this all gets resolved?
Well, it depends, I think, what the applicants are going to do next, because they obviously built it with some understanding. And again, it depends on the representations provided by ALC staff. So it may go summarily, and the best case would probably be 6 months to a year. And if there's other proceedings that follow, it could take a number of years.
Okay. And I also had a question with regards to N1. The costs were missing, and I'm just wondering, do we have the total costs of this plan, as well as what funds they will be paid from?
Thank you. I think we'd have to get back to you with that, because I don't have it right before me at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Impopta?
Just back to the same matter. Can you, through your worship to staff, advise or inform whether the occupancy permit has been achieved for this dwelling, and if not, if we can hold that back until this matter is resolved?
The final inspection, we can determine that, yes.
Okay.
Great. Seeing no other discussion on items under information, motions arising from information 01. Does anybody wish to move that? Moved by Councillor Martins, seconded by Councillor Kunst. Is there any discussion on 01? Seeing none, call the question on 01. That carries unanimously. P1, I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rent. I think this speaks for itself. Largely, this is an attempt to respond to the 2 delegations and some other feedback from the public about the duplication of permit fees at the same rate as cash and lieu fees, which are in some cases creating very significant burden for some that wish to renovate, add a garage, and the tens of thousands of dollars. This is here for council's consideration in response to those delegations. Is there any other discussion on P1? Seeing none, call the question on P1. That carries. Councillor Richter opposed. Councillor Kunst, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just move that.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any? Go ahead, Councillor Kunst.
Oh yeah. So the extreme weather we currently experienced the last few weeks kind of highlighted, absolutely highlighted the sad reality that we don't have any warming centers in the township of Langley. I know that we do support the Gateway of Hope and the work that they do, but after coming home from a warm vacation to 40 below, I received messages on my phone and also phone calls to where is townships warming centers, and where's the list like the one that Surrey has, those sorts of conversations. So it really kind of highlighted for me the need for reaching out into our community to maybe, maybe we start in Aldergrove, as you see in my notice of motion. I learned that in Aldergrove, I believe it's the St. Dunstan Church that feeds about 90 people, potentially 90 people every week on Thursdays. I read in the newspaper that Meals on Wheels opened their doors to provide just some coffee and a warm place for people to rest during these really difficult times for some of our homeless, especially that live in Aldergrove. So I'm hoping that council will support this motion. And I just wanted to highlight what some of the other communities are doing. The city of Burnaby, New West, Vancouver, and Richmond all activated overnight warming centers in response to this weather event. Surrey extended hours at their rec center for 2 days. They also fund a daytime drop-in service. The city of Vancouver, they extended their hours at their community center. New Westminster launched 2 daytime warming spaces. North Vancouver expanded hours at Civic Spaces, White Rock, Coquitlam. So that's the reason that I brought this forward. And I know in the past we've done work with some churches in the area, Sharon United in one case. So I would just really like to see us maybe have a coordinated effort up in Aldergrove. Maybe we start there. I believe there's some good people, good organizations that would be willing to sit around the table and see if we can get something going in Aldergrove. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to anything here. It's interesting. I just wanted to know if I'm trying to look at the motion, the best way to go forward with something like this. And Mr. Mayor, I'm looking, I guess you'll have to come back to me. I'm looking more of a referral to, look to staff to look exactly, what we do have, what the province has, what the schools have, other things, and then they could kind of report back to us and see what we can or cannot do based on our locations and a few other things.
Okay,
So that's what I'm looking for.
Make a note, come back to you. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I like the idea that we're looking and doing something, because I've been involved with EWR since it first started. And every year it's the same thing. We're going to have freezing temperatures next week. What are we going to do? Or we're going to have, and this is the first year that BC Housing is funding extreme weather response in the summer to heat. And I support this kind of stuff. It's a start. What I believe is going to happen in the future is people have got to get brave and come up with some solutions that are much more permanent. There are some alternatives starting to show, because every community goes through this kind of stuff. And we have to really be careful when we're talking about, because when you're dealing with BC Housing, is when you're talking about warming shelters, that's during the day. That's so people can come in. And then there's the emergency weather shelters, and that's where they stay overnight. So this is a good start. I'm going to support it. I'm not going to fool around with trying to adjust it on the fly. But we've got to start getting a lot more serious in the future about some kind of permanent solution that will help people, and not just panic at the last moment, whether hot or cold. And I really stress people don't look at the hot nearly enough. So I'm going to support this. It's a good start.
Councillor Martins?
Thank you. Thank you to Councillor Kunst for bringing this forward. We are really behind here in Langley on this one. My experience with extreme weather is, of course, from my background of policing, and when there is an extreme weather alert declared, that triggers the Assistance to Shelter Act. And that requires police officers are out there. If they come across somebody who is outside in extreme weather, they need to do a risk assessment. And if they believe that person is at risk and endangered, the act requires that they try to gain voluntary consent of the individual to transport them to somewhere. And if not, they're actually obliged to take them. And it's really difficult for our police agencies when there is nowhere to transport them to. And I've heard from the local police. This is a difficult thing for them. It's happened again with this last extreme weather, and there's nothing worse than I'm obligated to help this person and I have nowhere to take them. And so, going back to human dignity, and the legislation is already there requiring that we do it. And as Councillor Kunst has mentioned, other municipalities have come to the table and they have their own policies in place for what happens when we have an extreme weather situation. And even warming centers during the day, just give them an opportunity to come in and warm up. It is a step closer. And so I fully support this. I hope that we can move forward and come up with some good solutions just for the sake of those very vulnerable people that are out on the streets. Thank you.
Councillor Van Popta?
Yeah, I appreciate the spirit of what this motion is. I just unfortunately have questions or concerns regarding the therefore be it resolved paragraph. As it's written, it's a direction to automatically partner with or support local nonprofit or faith-based organizations in operating an emergency shelter. I think at this point we actually need to get a report first, get the framework on what that looks like, how we would operate something like that, what kind of parameters we would have in place to set up a partnership. I don't think we should move straight to partnership at this point. So I would kind of default back to Councillor Ferguson's idea that we should maybe refer this back to staff and maybe just work with getting a report, what we have in place, what we can do, and how to get there and how to do it. And maybe incorporate, as Councillor Bailey was speaking about, wrapping in, maybe just doing this as an extreme weather option so that we can encompass extreme heats in the summer and just have a policy in general or some sort of partnership. So for right now, I'd like to see this referred back to staff to work on a framework on how we would get this going rather than moving straight to partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, talking about moving straight to partnerships, I did say potential. So here's the thing that I learned over the weekend. We're talking about the homeless count. We're talking about how that works. We have people living in cars, sheds, dilapidated trailers with no heat. A warming center, maybe they don't get to sleep there that night. But from what I've been told, even if they can just warm up during the day, that might help them survive the night. Okay, so that really, really, really hit me. I don't really care what this council wants to do. If we want to wait for a report and then that just makes it even, further down the road, you want to kick this can further down the road, that's fine. I'm hoping that we can just work together, whether we talk about partnerships or support or funding or doing something bigger and grander, I'm all for it. So I'm just thinking about the people that would now have to wait even longer because we're going to refer it for a report before we actually start doing anything about it. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, you had a referral?
Yeah, I do want to make a referral.
Okay,
I also want to refer that this particular motion be referred to staff and have a report as soon as possible, and that we can decide upon accordingly.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta.
And I did want to say, any further? Go ahead. This is by known. It seems like at this council table, for some strange reason, people get a little bit more emotional than expected. We at this council do not want to put people on the street. I don't want to put people on the street. I have worked with a number of agencies. Our church had a warming center. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of people out there that spend a lot of time providing funding, going to certain churches and certain other areas that have free food, free clothing, other things throughout the community on a daily basis. So I believe it's important to work with a lot of folks and continue, because nobody's stopping doing the work they're doing, as I'm not. And basically, the more information we can get out, the more people we can provide helping, that way I believe it's going to work. I don't think anybody's telling people to stop or telling that this council is opposed to working with other agencies, including the provincial and federal governments. Anyway, those are my points. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, excuse me for if I appeared to get emotional. I actually don't feel like I was emotional at all. Trying to just bring this forward in a diplomatic way.
It may not have been directed at you.
I believe it was.
I have no idea.
You don't have to stick up for him.
No councillor was mentioned. Go ahead.
Okay, but I was the last one who spoke.
No,
so.
fair enough.
So anyway, I'm not sure how a report or a referral of a report is gonna. So I can't support the referral.
I understand. Councillor Martins?
Yeah, no, I can't support this referral either. And if I get emotional about this, I claim that, because I care about the people out on the street. I care about dragging this out further and further to get a report and see what we can do. And I'm hearing from the first responders that are actually on the street facing this, dealing with this, trying to figure out what to do with people they come across. And I hear from service providers who have actually really tried. They've tried really hard to come up with alternate solutions. There's only the one shelter right now with Gateway of Hope where they've got the additional 15 mats for all of Langley when there's an extreme weather. And they were not able to secure a second location, and they tried. They went through the whole faith community. They've tried so many agencies trying to make it work. And I think that we need to step up and show some leadership and try and assist them, and not in a long-term report way. I think we need to do it now. We are in the winter. We are currently dealing with weather events, and I think time is of the essence. And if that makes me emotional, then I claim it.
Yeah, the interesting thing that's been left out of here, which I think is interesting, is school district. The province has gymnasiums all over the community. You can set up warming centers in a day if it wanted to. They have the funding, they have the facilities, and they have the mandate. And I think maybe an oversight, maybe they would be considered a nonprofit, but they could do it in a day if they chose. Councillor Bailey, go ahead.
I'll own that emotional thing. When you've got a 21-year-old young lady who's obviously new on the street and it's below freezing and you're driving around illegally with them in your fire truck, you get a little emotional because there's nowhere to take her, and you know that she's just bait on the street. So, well, this is not perfect. It's a start. And when I see explore potential options, okay, I have zero problem with that. And I don't want to boot this around and try to wordsmith it and all that. It's good enough where it is right now. It's a start because, as Councillor Martin says, damn right first responders get emotional about this stuff when you have people freezing and losing toes and fingers because there's nowhere to take them. And I've been in that situation, and I fully want to vote this down and this referral down and get to the motion.
Councillor Mpapta?
Yeah, so there's nobody at this table that doesn't care. And to be implied that some people care more than others is whatever. I'm going to just leave it with that. The challenge that I have with the way that the motion has been written is that there's no guarantee that we as council get to see what these options are. As it is written, this is a staff-driven exploratory procedure, and that they can go ahead and implement. There's no guarantee that we're going to see what the plan is, how it's going to be done, any cost implications. And so it's just, unfortunately, it's just an administrative thing that I've got with this. It's not the intent, and to be implied otherwise is really unfair. I want to see this done, and I want to see it done well, because we only have one opportunity to do this Or we could, I guess, somebody else could do it again and try and bring another motion later. But I think we have an opportunity right now. This is before us, and it's a great thing to have it here so that we can address this. I just want to see that it gets done properly and well, and that it encompasses missing details like school district and otherwise. So let's just get all the information and hustle. Let's put a time limit on when we can get this report back to us. But just to say staff explore potential options is not good enough for this council table if we want to see what the plan is. And so that I'm just going to leave it with that. And yeah.
Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yeah, I mean, the reality is, the first phone call I'll be making tomorrow morning will be to, basically maybe 2 phone calls. Number 1 to the fire chief and number 2 to the police chief, and see how many calls they've had for service and how many times they've been turned down by an organization which we supported from day one, the Salvation Army Gateway of Hope, that we provide funding for. I mean, the reality is there are other groups, but to say they're turned down or others, I would like to know that, the details. And as far as, I'm emotional about this as well. I think it's very, very important. And I know where I'm going to be Wednesday morning, going to the free store and dropping off goods. We also drop off, my wife and myself drop off things to other organizations. So I'm sure other members of council do the same thing, but I know what I'll be doing this week. Thank you.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think unfortunately the conversation kind of deviated from what the motion is about. It became more about us on this table than the people that this motion is probably trying to help. And so I won't support the referral. I don't think friendly amendments exist technically, but if they did, I would ask if the proponent would entertain the addition to the first therefore be it resolved clause that staff explore and report to council on potential options to partner. And if that wasn't sufficient, then I think at the end of the day, the worst thing that happens is that we open a space to help people and we go from there.
Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, I'm open to however this goes, except for kicking it down the road. Even if you would like to include, school district. I mean, I know that in the city, I believe it was Douglas Park, was a warming center for, a couple of years ago. So absolutely open to whatever. We can make friendly amendments. I think we can actually do that at this table. So I'm open to that. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey?
I hate to say this, but I didn't imply anyone here doesn't care. I said there are some of us at this table who have a lot more experience about why we are passionate about this. And when you're sitting there and looking at data is wonderful, okay, but it has huge holes. Police and fire don't always get calls for people on the street. Unfortunately, some of them die without a call. And some of them are trying to find little corners that they can hide in and that. So to look for how many calls were received by police and fire will be a very incomplete look, just like the homeless report is. It is recognized that most of those homeless reports are only about a third or a quarter of the actual people on the street because they don't count couch surfers. They don't count people who are hiding in other areas or are in cars or any of that. It's only the people that they can count at specific locations in a 24-hour period. So this is not perfect. And I love the friendly amendment idea, but I will be voting against referral.
Seeing no other discussion, I call the question on the referral of P2. Referral is defeated with Councillor Richter, Councillor Kuntz, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Van Popte, Councillor Pratt, Councillor Martins opposed. And we're back to the main motion. Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move an amendment in 2 parts, or potentially 2 amendments, whatever is easier for staff to process. The first being the words added after the word explore are, and report to council on. So the first line would read, therefore be it resolved that staff explore and report to council on potential options, etc. And then the subsequent part would be the elimination of kind of the words after partner and
let's do it separately then, if you want to remove words. So is there a seconder to that first amendment? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Go ahead, Councillor Pratt, on the First Amendment.
Yeah, I think on the First Amendment, we can get to a report out of this motion and hopefully get to an actual deliverable out of it sooner rather than later.
Great. Is there any other discussion on that amendment? Councillor Martins.
Yeah, and thank you. I support this because, as Councillor Kuntz has said, we just need to move ahead here and do something. If we're waiting for a report from staff, is there a way to have this prioritized, understanding that we are in the heat of a bad weather season? I guess that would be my request. I don't know if staff can provide any assurance of it, because I would feel a lot better knowing that this is be given top priority.
Mr. Backen, I think you could take that under advisement. We could maybe discuss in the next few days the timeline after SMT has a chance to consider the timeline for which this could be delivered.
That'd be prudent, Your Worship, because if we are going to make it a priority, we should be knowing what other matters we're displacing. So I think further discussion would assist, so we can certainly try to expedite.
But I think we take the point that it's cold outside and this is the time to do it, and then the summer's coming up again where this is also an issue year-round. So take that. I'm not seeing a difference between the referral and this amendment, but I'll leave that up to Council. Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through yourself to staff, would it be easier or would it be helpful for a further be it resolved clause to be added with a timeline established to say?
We could consider that as an additional amendment if you wish, but why don't we dispose of this first one?
Sure.
Okay. So seeing no other discussion on that First Amendment, call the question on P2. That carries unanimously. Councillor Pratt, if you had another amendment, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I'll get to the crux of what I want to try and achieve here, so then staff can help me wordsmith. Effectively broaden the scope of the potential organizations we would partner with, so it would include the school district, et cetera. So kind of leaning towards changing the words to partner with or support local nonprofit and or faith-based organizations to something along the lines of potential options to partner with various community organizations to broaden the scope. I don't know if that's a friendly amendment, Councillor Kunst, or not, if that changes the point.
It seems to be supported by the mover, so that's fine. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Go ahead. Did you wish to discuss it further, Councillor Pratt? Okay. Is there any other discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, call the question on P2 as amended. That carries unanimously, so that is now amended twice. Councillor Pratt, did you have a third?
I did, yes.
Go ahead.
That a third be it resolved clause be added to say, be it resolved that the report be presented to council no later than, what's the second meeting in February? Is that soon enough, Councillor Kunst, or?
Mr. Backen, I mean, I know we've done dates on occasion, but I've usually discussed them with you before that. Is there any concern about 30 days?
I would just suggest as soon as practical, and that way we can actually make it a priority, but it won't be state specific. Because
How about as soon as practical, given the urgency of the matter? Okay. Is that good, Councillor Pratt? Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Sorry, seconded by Councillor Bailey, who's waving. Councillor Pratt, do you have any more on that amendment?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on that amendment?
We look so much alike.
Yes. Seeing none, I'll call the question on this is the third amendment, Ms. Little? Third amendment to P2. That carries unanimously. So now back to P2 as amended.
I have one more amendment.
Councillor Popta, go ahead.
Sorry, I would like to add one more amendment if possible, and that is just to change the last whereas. It says emergency warming.
So the whereas clauses you're referring to?
Yeah, just the first, sorry, the third whereas.
Just to clarify though, that Ms. Little, maybe whereases are not technically part of the motion or staff direction. They're not what staff act on. They're the preface or the logic for the motion, which may or may not. I want to say they are not used by staff. Mr. Backen, you would say that potentially some of them can be editorial, so they're not part of the motion. Is that correct?
Nope, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, can I just would staff, based on this, just understand that it's for warming and possibly and cooling, considering our challenges that we have in extreme heat?
I think emergency shelters, Mr. Backen, are becoming a year-round requirement.
Yep, that's understood.
Yeah, I think that's understood. Yeah.
That's good enough.
Okay, so we'll go back. Councillor Kuntz, go ahead.
I just wanted to, so in my therefore in the first one, it highlights Aldergrove, but I still want, if staff understood that there is potential for, some people to come together in Aldergrove. And I don't want to go into some of the details, but I think that, I still hope that that's kind of going to be the first priority. So if that still captures that in this, then I'm okay with, the amendments and will support.
Great. Seeing no other discussion, I'd see call the question on P2 as amended. And that carries unanimously. I get a motion to resolve into special close. Does anybody have an item? You have an item? Councillor Van Popte, you're done? You don't have an item? You're good? Councillor Richter?
Yes, I have 3 items here. The first
other
one,
business. You're right. I'm sorry. I skipped
Yeah.
over. Go ahead, Councillor Richter. Yeah.
First one is on items distributed on January 25th, item number 19, which I see that staff did respond to in items distributed today. But I think further investigation is necessary, and that's about Langley families struggling to provide extras right now for themselves or their family. That the cutoff for assistance for recreation programs is way too low, and families are dealing with a crisis of sorts with the insane cost of living right now. And we should be lifting the financial assistance threshold to $65,000 a year. I'd like staff to report back to us why we could not do that now. The second item that comes out of items distributed is item number 22, and this has come forward to council in a couple of different packages. There's quite a lengthy history, it seems, here. But in this 3200 block of 275 Street, the issue about this ditch being snow-covered and the safety risks that poses during periods of time when it is snow-covered is something that I think merits additional consideration. So I'm wondering if perhaps staff could bring one sort of consolidated report back as to how to deal with this and what the costs would be. And then I'd like to make a motion that delegations 3 and 4 today be referred to staff for a report on additional actions that could be taken. Or if I can put that last part in.
Yeah, I think we might need a motion for that one, Councillor Richter. That might be a rather lengthy report, Mr. Backen, as opposed to a memo.
Yeah.
So you wish to make that motion, Councillor Richter?
Yes, I do.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Kunst. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Van Popte?
Sorry, is this in regards to the truck?
Yes, these are the
The
first
truck
2
parking?
delegations. That's 3 and 4, which were regarding truck parking on ALR. Additional steps that could be taken.
Oh, additional steps or additional information?
Additional steps, I believe, is the motion.
Yeah, well, it's for a report on additional actions that could be taken. Because all we can do with delegations is refer to staff for a report, right?
So there's no discussion. I'll call the question on seeing what else can be done, subject to the delegations. Is that going to be P3? That carries unanimously. Councillor Richter, anything else?
No, thank you very much.
Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, mine was under items going towards in camera.
Okay,
You're
so
not
I have
there
one.
yet, are you?
I have one. I have one as well. Is there any other business? Seeing none, I get does anybody have an item for special closed? I have a legal item. Personnel item. I have a legal item. Anybody else have any items? Councillor Martins?
Yeah, legal item.
Councillor Kunst?
Correspondence.
Correspondence. Councillor Ferguson?
Item I1, Section 91, property negotiations.
So you're adding an item?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, asking a question.
Okay, so we'll assume you're adding an item. Ms. Little, do you have all of that?
I have Mayor Woodward has one legal item, Mr. Backen has one personnel item, Councillor Martins has a legal item, Councillor Kuntz correspondence, and Councillor Ferguson a question on a property negotiating.
Is that everything? Okay, great. So I'll get a motion to resolve any special close as amended. I'll move that. Is there a second? Or seconded by Councillor Rint? Call the question on Q1. That carries unanimously. Get a motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Rintz, seconded by Councillor Bailey. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you.